Blacksmith of the Apocalypse. By Arra. Chapter 221. An unexpected encounter. The horizon was dominated by the mountains, and the path was surrounded by a mix of hilly forests and meadows. Before the world went haywire, these stretches of land were abandoned and left for nature to recapture. When the districts were founded, most old cities and landscape were abandoned and left behind. It was all in an attempt to have nature recover and stop the climate change. Most of these forests had all grown after the districts had been founded, and they could see the one or other ruin of buildings here and there. The road here was old but still usable even with the carriages. An unpleasant memory of his time in Alpha resurfaced at these sites. But it was just a minor problem. Leaving the city also meant entering the danger zone. There were no guards or patrols that could help them here. And the dungeons were only irregularly checked. The only thing currently keeping away the monsters in this forest were the wards EV had cast upon their vehicles. These were seethed with monsters and other things. They were not necessarily strong, but nobody knew what had come through the pathworks or had escaped from the dungeons. Vigilance was a necessity even if the world looked calm on the surface. Even with the wards, they were no guarantee. Just like how humans were not too affected by their power. There could also be monsters with a high intellect or willpower. Bandits or races that came through the pathworks were also a possible threat. Tilda, and you are saying the people simply followed your government's regulations and abandoned their homes to move into a giant city? Tilda. Well, of course not everyone wanted to. There might still be a lot of people out there living in the ruins. Nobody was forced. The government back then used incentives to have people move to the city. Oh yeah, and many people changed their minds really fast when the infrastructure was not maintained anymore. Tilda, I see. Do you think those people are still alive? Tilda. When Seth wanted to answer, their small talk was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. At the roadside in front was a camping site with tents and camping fires. Some of the campers were standing on the crumbling road. Cat people. Tyjark. Unlike beastmen like Miner that were closer to humans, these were more on the animal side. Their stature was less humanoid and more like a big cat walking on its hind legs. They wore wide robes and fabrics like desert nomads. Only a few of them wore custom armor, probably the guardians of their group. Seth was sitting on the coachman's seat of the armored carriage. He saw Monique pull out her weapons while Allison got ready to cast a spell. Put down your weapons. Seth hurriedly called and walked to the front. He passed the first carriage and the armor beasts that were pulling it. The reason he came forward to meet them was that he had heard about these people during journey to Arra. He had even met some of them there. They were traveling merchants. A long time ago they were banished from their homeworld and became dimensional nomads. They traveled the pathworks and would trade wherever they ended up. Often their inventory was loaded with all kinds of rarities from the different dimensions they had visited. As one would expect from those that often travel to random places, their warriors were no joke. Unless provoked they would be very amicable. Although very cunning, one could make great deals with them if they were smart and didn't offend them. Seth stepped forward and used the formal greeting of the Chrono Empire. May your travels span dimensions. And elderly Tyjark stepped forward. His silver and black fur's color was fading from age, but his eyes were sharp with a bright light. He also did the formal greeting just like Seth and answered. And may you always find a warm hearth to rest. It is good to meet someone civilized in such a chaotic world. Have you people just arrived here? We have arrived a few days ago. But our scout only met with hostile people when we tried to enter the settlement. It looks quite imposing, but the people are not very welcoming, the elder said downheartedly. Don't take it to heart. The people in this place have a hard time coping with the changes in our world. My name is Seth Smith. What may I call you? You can call me Drosy, I am the caravan leader of this pack. Did you eat already? We are currently cooking. How about a tea and we talk until dinner is ready? The old cat spoke Seth's language. He signaled for the carriage to pull up and join the area of the camping site. While the rest of the party was taking care of the carriages and the beast, Seth followed Drosy to his tent. Calling it a tent didn't really do it justice. It was a big yurt with carpets and pillows on the ground and its own little campfire in the middle. Drosy and Seth sat down at the campfire and a pair of females started brewing them tea. I'm glad to have met someone ready to speak with us. The previous travelers were. The old cat said with a rough sigh. Seth could hear that they had gone through some hardships since arriving on Earth. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry for my world's people acting like this, but I hope you can understand them. This is still new to them, and they don't know much about the other world. New to them? The old man asked in surprise. But Seth only smiled slyly. He roughly knew why the Tyjark stayed here for several days. Cat people had a lot of experience in gaining a foothold in a foreign world. They would stay in a place they judged relatively safe and get as much information as possible from traveler before deciding where to go. Yes, new. This world has only recently been connected to the pathworks. About a year ago, he said with a smile. The elder's eyes jumped wide open. He knew very well what it meant for a world to have just connected to the pathworks. Chaos on an apocalyptic scale. From natural disasters to war and civil wars. Anything could change the face of the world during this time period. Seth took the cup of tea from the female server and calmly swirled it before taking a sip. A bitter but intriguing taste of a citrus fruit filled his mouth. He could feel his mana being roused a little. The tea had slightly raised his mana regeneration. I see. I'm glad they are not outright antagonistic to our people. So it's still their phase of acclimation, the elder answered calmly. Seth just nodded. They drank the tea in relative silence. May I ask where you are heading? The other finally asked. Seth sighed. This old cat was very patient. Seth had waited for a chance to talk about business, but Drosy tried to slowly gain information through conversation. The cat was patient, Seth wasn't. You are a very experienced trader. Let's skip the small talk, okay? I know you want information about this world. I can tell you anything you want, but not for free. Seth had tried to be smart about it and thrown out some bait that increased the price. The fact that Earth was freshly added to the pathworks was very valuable information and showed that Seth was a good source of information. But the Tyjarch had kept his calm and patiently tried to get more free info. After Seth spoke up, the cat lowered his cup while slowly nodding. Seth was right, he was a trader for over 120 years. He was not offended by Seth's directness. Although free information was great, time was also money. His gaze sharpened as the old cat went into business mode. You are more knowledgeable than I thought. Let's talk business then. What is your... Now we are talking. How about showing me your inventory? I think we will be able to negotiate a lot better once we both know what the other wants. Drosy nodded in agreement and used a skill unique to traders and merchants. It was the shop interface. Here the trader could choose to display a part of their inventory space. A big bonus of this skill was that the customer would be able to see a label with the name of the items, if the trader himself knew them. To Seth's surprise, he found a lot of fabrics in the trader's inventory. The last place they had stocked up in must have been known for their tailors. There were many weird fabrics like, or... His eyes stopped in 3 specific fabrics. The label only gave the names and he had to ask the caravan leader about them. Feather silk was a rare fabric and known for its immense strength in comparison to its extremely light weight. Ghost fleece was an epic fabric weaved from the essence of specters and had immaterial properties that could turn it invisible or make it float. Oricluiav was a unique fabric weaved by an augur to see or influence the future and fate. It could strengthen a diviner's skill or bring luck. These were definitely of interest to Seth, who had a craftsman tailor up his sleeve. But they were much too valuable compared to the information he had. So he kept browsing the trader's inventory. Chapter 222. Sticks and Stones tilde. There were quite a few good materials in the elder's inventory and Seth soon found something he deemed appropriate to barter for his information. It was a small rough stone fit to be used in some kind of accessory. Materials that influenced luck were hard to find, but not as sought after as other materials. The price would not be too over the top. Drosy nodded when Seth told him his choice. If your information is sufficient, we have a deal. Seth and Drosy spent quite a while in the yurt exchanging information about Earth until someone notified them that the meal was ready. Let's pause here and eat something. We can keep talking after a meal. I think you still have other business you wish to talk about. I appreciate someone that can interrupt business talks for a good meal, Seth said thankfully, and they left the tent. At the campfire sat Seth's party. They already had bowls with a thick glistening soup in their hand. The smell and sight made Seth's mouth water. After the initial awkwardness, the party members had started getting along with the Tyjarch quite well. Tekka's daughter Ruby was even playing with the younglings of the group. Drosy and Seth sat down at the fire and were immediately handed bowls of soup and a soft flatbread as a spoon and for dipping. The thick soup had a strong unknown flavor that captured Seth's full attention. He heard the sound of notification that ended with. It was actually buff food and had a permanent effect. It was a shame that he was not in a position to just hog all the soup for himself. But it was a great sign of hospitality and skill. They had amicable chit-chat during the meal and the cat. People started singing and dancing afterward. Seth entrusted diplomatic interaction to his party, Ruby especially. She was great at making friends with the foreign race. He and Drosy returned to the yurts and continued their conversation. When Seth finished talking about Earth, the elder gave him the and this finished their deal. Now then, I saw that you were interested in other products. Yes, there are few things I would like to buy. Tyjarch has wares if you have coins. Can you pay? Comes down to your prices. I could also barter. I have quite a bit rare gear I could offer, too. Tyjarch prefers cash. Don't speak too fast. You have a lot of materials, but the crafting professions are not that far in this place. Good gear is much more sought after than good items. Drosy nodded. After everything Seth had told him, it was understandable. It didn't mean he fully trusted Seth's information. But there was no harm in a good deal. Even if they could not sell the gear, good gear could be worn by their warriors. The old cat and the blacksmith bonded over bartering for several hours. Seth not only acquired the fabrics but also a few interesting materials. Among other and the latter was a rare leather. The marble was a big block of stone but didn't count as a blacksmith material. Drosie's description had caught his attention. It was a marble that collected and focused the power of the sun. Maybe it could be useful to Puffles. If not, he would find a way to profit from it. It was not too expensive. The most interesting were a few bars of metal called. He already had a great idea for what he would do with this metal. Seth planned to send the fabrics to Nadel, to have him make a cloak. The result could be really cool. The other things he had mostly bought out of interest. The best thing was that H did not spend a single piece of his gold. Instead he managed to barter the materials for some weapons and the rest of the rings he had brought from Arra. Both parties were satisfied with their deal and enjoyed another cup of tea to celebrate. So, where do you plan to travel with your caravan? Seth finally asked. He had told the elder about the districts and their current situations. Is there a reason you are asking? Well, I would not recommend you to go to Y.City. They have a hard time dealing with foreigners. We are on the way to Delta where the Chrono Empire has a foothold. Maybe you would like to join us. Seth would have loved for them to join. The caravan of cat people would give great security on their journey. He didn't worry about himself or the party member, but more people meant more people that could protect Ruby. Everyone else could fight, run or just teleport to Y.City in the worst case. Evie was immortal. But Ruby had no way to fight or run. More people meant more defenders. Although she wasn't his daughter, he didn't know what to tell Tekka if his daughter died. This journey was his idea after all. Drosie thought for a moment. We have just met. Can you tell me your reason? Seth shared his worries and thoughts about Ruby and Tekka. Drosie's eyebrows jumped up in surprise. You are a more responsible person than the first impression made me believe. All right, let's travel together from here on. They shook hands and sealed the deal. Seth returned to his team after they talked about the details for some more time. The party had parked their carriages to the side of the Tyjark camp and were setting up tents. It was getting dark already. Listen up, guys. I have good news. We will travel together with the caravan from now on. They will help us on the journey and we will lead the way. The caravan is getting set off tomorrow morning and we should be able to depart before noon. Before they went to sleep, Seth explained the plan from now on. The gourmet hunter would join up with the scouts of the cat people to scope out the path in front. Allison would stay with the rest of the party in the middle of the caravan. In case something happened to the scouts, she would be the backup to find their right path. Evie. Tomorrow morning you will also place your wards on the carriages of the cat people. They have their own measures to keep monsters away, but we decided that it would do no harm to double up on security. Evie nodded, motivated. The others also nodded in agreement. Especially Tekka seemed to noticeably relax. It was a quiet night, and they could leave guard duty to the Tyjark. The next day, after preparing all morning of freeloading another meal, Seth sat beside Drosie on the driver's seat of the caravan leader's carriage. The carriage was not as comfortable as the ones added with modern luxuries like seat cushions. In exchange, they were very sturdy and easily dealt with the crumbling street. The cat carriages were pulled by big, feathered monitor lizards. Seth asked Drosie, who explained that they were one of the best mounts for traveling. The lizards could deal with most climates and had extremely high stamina compared to a low feeding cost. They were not very imposing, but the best if one traveled a lot. Link and some cat hunters were scouting the way up front, and they made a lot of ground during the day. They were still in the foothills of the Great Mountain Range and had not yet encountered anything that could go against Evie's wards. It didn't mean there were no monsters. Link and the hunters reported a variety of beasts in the vicinity in case the wards or other countermeasures didn't work. Against expectation, they made it through the day without having to fight even once. In the evening they found a place, set up a temporary camp. Chapter 223. Let's break some bones. Tilda. For the temporary camp, they parked the carriages to build a wagon fort. They could maximize the effect of Evie's wards in this way. This time Seth's party shared their rations with the cat people. It was Link's time to shine as a chef and cook for the caravan. Or share some of the prepared food. One person cooking for more than 30 people was a little much to ask. He distributed the food he had cooked at the church and stored in his inventory. The cat people had a surprised look on their faces when they tasted the food. They ate the food with similar valor, as the party members had gorged on their soup. Link grinned from one ear to the other when he saw people appreciate his cooking. It was a joyful evening if one ignored that they were camping in a monster-infested wilderness. Since it was their food, Seth did not have to hold back and ate several portions before falling asleep satisfied. Tilda, hey, relaxo. Wake up, the caravan is ready to keep going. Tilda. What? He woke up abashedly. The caravan had already packed up and saddled up. Everyone had finished preparations while he was sound asleep. He hurriedly got up and stored away his stuff. While chowing down on some rations he walked to his place on the carriage. "I guess you slept well," the old cat teased. Drosy was already up on his seat with the reins in his hands. "Never been good with waking up early," he grumbled and answered and sat down beside the caravan leader. Pictures of his broken alarm clock flashed through his mind. It felt like such a long time since his journey started, even though it was barely a year since then. The surroundings finally started to change on their fourth day traveling through the foothills. Trees and other plants became smaller and scarcer. It could not be called a forest at this point as rocky terrain started to dominate the landscape. The wind became stronger and colder in this place and the weather would change from clear to rainy in the blink of an eye. Less vegetation was no guaranteed for a better field of view. The paths were surrounded by boulders and crevasses where things could hide even from vigilant eyes. His eyes and sharp ears had long registered the arrival of the caravan. Normally, those messengers below LV.20 would do their best to avoid any fights and hide from attackers. That was how those people survived the journey. Seth's company did not have that option. The wards had kept away the weaker beasts in the forests, but here where the real mountains began were the big guys. Seth and his party could have somehow tried to cheat their way through, but he did not trust his luck. That's why he had allied with the cat people. In this mountainous region, the first monsters that did not care about the ward appeared. In past stood an iconic figure. A dreaded existence that had ended the journey of many players, in a popular game he had played. It was an ice troll. Standing on the crumbling road in the soft wind-swept drizzle it blocked their way. It was over 3 meters tall with snow-white fur and grey skin. The 4 pairs of menacing crimson eyes stared at them as the wind played with its fur. Trolls were known for their extremely high regeneration and endurance. On top of that, they were abnormally strong and resilient. Ice trolls were like normal trolls but doped. Still, one troll would easily fall to their forces. Why did it stand in the open like this? It was in the moment when Seth imagined noticing a contemptuous smile on the rough monster's face. "Ambush," the scout exclaimed. It was the call from a young cat scout. He was the first to notice something amiss. "Get in positions." Drosy's voice filled the still empty landscape. The carriage hurried to form a circle around the armored carriage. One troll was not enough. Even trolls knew that much. From nooks and cranny, from behind boulders and ledges above appeared a pack of ice trolls. A quick glance told them that these beasts were all around LV.50. Considering these were 3-meter tall ice trolls, they were a much greater pain in the butt than the same number of humanoids on this level. An adult troll on LV.1 was already equivalent to a LV.40 player. The 50 levels came on top of that. Ice trolls were another notch above that. These monsters were likely much more dangerous than the wyverns he had faced on his way to Tora. They were outnumbered by roughly 2-1. The pack of almost 40 ice trolls had loosely surrounded the caravan. Against them stood Seth's party of 7 and the 3 scouts, 10 guardians, and 2 mags of the caravan. Unlike Drosy and the mags, who looked like giant house cats, the guardians and scouts resembled big predators like tigers, lions, pumas, panthers, and leopards. In the meantime, children and non-combative women had squeezed into the armored carriage. Allison, Evie, Link, Drosy, and the mags took station on top of the armored carriage to support the vanguards who surrounded the wagon fort in a circle. Seth wielded his wyvern set. Considering the strength and endurance of the trolls, their party might have been able to gain some stats through their weapons. Was it appropriate to hold back his fire in such a dire situation, to gain attributes? Could the Tyjark handle the numerical disadvantage? Seth's worries vaporized when he saw the guardians of the cat people. These warriors were serious from the start. They put away their weapons and got pumped. Literally. Cat warrior was not their final form. Blood-curdling roars echoed through the mountains as their fur stood up and their bodies grew and bulked up to rival or even surpass those of the ice trolls. Claws like daggers grew from their paws and they rushed the pack of trolls. One guardian could easily handle 1 or 2 trolls. Jonah could also handle 2 at once while Monique could fight 3 holding the upper hand. Tekka managed to block 3 trolls from advancing. Felix, Evie's familiar, was also busy distracting a troll. Link and Evie were occupied with spreading debuffs to ease the vanguard's burden, while the mags started opening fire at the trolls, minding friendly fire. Even if Seth didn't pull all his registers, they were able to manage just fine. Dragon Might. The level and attribute difference with the trolls was huge, but it still had some effect on them as their movements slightly slowed. With this, Seth also took on 2 of the icy monsters and focused on giving them death through 1,000 cuts. However, one could not underestimate the ice trolls. Their skins were thick and most injuries inflicted on them healed within moments. Only cut off limbs and broken bones took slightly longer to recover. Even injuries to the vitals were not fatal unless it was their head. It was great for Seth's party since the trolls would not die no matter how often they cut them. The effects were not as good as he had anticipated after their crazy grinding in the fog dimension. Seth felt a slight increase with every hit, but it took about 10 swings before his endurance went up by 1. He was a little confused, but it was not exactly the time to think. It just meant he had to cut more often. Playtime was soon over. Unlike the trolls, the caravan member did not automatically heal. Evie could not handle the role of healer alone, but even after Drosy revealed himself as a shaman, they had a hard time keeping everyone alive. Everything was in a fragile balance, but this balance had a deadline. He had gained 7 points in endurance and 3 in strength when he decided that it was time. Seth equipped his big stick, and the iron rod went to work. It may not have been an epic item, but it did not mean it was weak, especially against this kind of opponent. He had no vanguard class, but his items easily made up the difference. A swing with the staff was blocked by a thick forearm but was accompanied by an audible crack from broken bones. Just endurance was not enough to mitigate the blunt force of Seth's strike. He backstepped to evade the swipe of the second troll. Seth's staff was enveloped in a layer of bright flames as he stabbed towards the abdomen of the attacker using the other end of the staff. The flame was like a spearhead as it penetrated fur and flesh, sending a wave of fire into the abdominal cavity. Before he could finish off the burned opponent who had sunk to its knees, its compatriot attacked him with its healthy arm. He ducked below the attack and smashed the creature's left knee. He turned, brought the fiery end of the staff around to crush the ice troll's head. With the right arm limply hanging down and tilting to the right, it could not evade or block. It could only watch the incoming attack that ended its life. He finished off the second troll who had a hard time doing anything with its innards cooked. He joined the casters in getting rid of the trolls that were not bound by the vanguard and the balanced quickly tilted to their favor. With Lynx and Evie's debuffs and Seth binding them in melee combat they had a hard time evading the magic as they did before. Monique and Jonah also finished their battles and went to help the pressed cat guardians. The battle soon ended with over 40 dead trolls surrounding the caravan. Chapter 224. And continue our journey Tilda. The battle ended without losses on their side. There were some injuries and 1 or 2 serious ones among the guardians, but the 2 healers and some HP. Potions. They stayed for a while to thoroughly harvest the ice troll corpses. Their blood and some of their organs were rare alchemy ingredients. Evie could also use some parts like the bones and fur. The troll leather was a rare-rated item with a high affinity to ice. The bones had the same affinity but were only uncommon. Evie's had more use for the latter than Seth. The biggest benefit for Seth were actually the roughly 20 souls dropped by them. The soul of the boss troll was even a big one. Seth didn't know whether this counted as a genius soul but they were definitely powerful. Even the monster souls with their powerful effect did not have a denominator. A more pressing question was, if there were ice souls then were there also fire souls? A big, rare fire soul or something similar might befit his gloves and armor made of. He would just have to find out what creatures had such souls. Fire trolls? No, he never heard of something like that. Fire dragons? Too strong. Was there anything else with fire attributes? Magma golems or something could be cool. Maybe he could find a fitting creature around Delta. It was a volcano after all. The caravan started moving again after the field of corpses was cleared. They burned the leftover that could not be harvested, otherwise, they might have lured more monsters to the path. As Seth sat on the carriage and looked into the distance, he had a thought. This was a rocky, desolate and cold landscape and it was currently raining. Shouldn't ice trolls be at a cooler place? Somewhere with snow and stuff like that? He asked Drosy to the left. The experienced caravan leaser agreed with him. They had not faced ice trolls in the past, but he confirmed that Seth was right. The general consensus was that ice trolls would normally live in colder regions with permanent snow or frost. Keeping that in mind they kept traveling along the road. Soon it started climbing higher and higher in wide serpentines. The higher they came the lower fell the temperature and snow soon started covering the surroundings. There were a few weak monsters that ran away from the wards, nothing else. If these were the regular inhabitants it made sense that people around LV-20 were able to walk this way normally. So why had the ice trolls moved? Tilda something must have displaced them. Tilda? Well, thanks Captain Obvious. I was about to come to that conclusion. Tilda yeah, I'm Sue Tilda you were Tilda the like said sarcastically. Seth, is everything alright? Drosy asked him worriedly. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was talking to someone with telepathy. He explained and told Droa his thought. The old cat nodded and hummed. That's a good explanation. But this means somewhere out there is something that made this kind of pack flee. Yeah, let's stop talking about it. We might set some flags otherwise. Flags? Why would we set those up? To find the way back? No. It's metaphorical. It means to name a possible danger or calamity and technically summoning by mentioning it. Oh, like if I said at least it doesn't harm you. Seth had reacted quickly and covered Drosy's mouth. Why are you immediately trying to set one right after I told you? He took away his hand. Ha, come on, young friend. Something like that is just superstition. Oh really? Okay. Go ahead then. Try guessing what the ice trolls ran away from and follow up with but I'm sure we won't come across it or something along those lines. Let's see if you are right. Something that could displace a pack of ice trolls. Maybe an ice snake. A really big one. but I don't think something like that even exists, so no worries. Well, done. Let's keep and wait for the snake. An hour went by. Another one. Nothing happened. See, I told you it's just supersti. A giant worm made up of boulders and rocks broke out of the mountain flank before them. It broke out from the face of the earth and dived back in on the other side of the road. It took a full 30 seconds for the whole body to pass by. Seth looked over to Drosy with an "I told you so" look. Technically that is not an ice snake. That's a stone biter. It's much more like a worm than a snake. Nitpicking. That's close enough to what you flagged to prove my point. Don't set flags. Soon the head, or better the front end, resurfaced. It was simply a giant circular mouth like a maelstrom made of rock to drill rocks and grind meat. After the bickering, all fighting personnel got in formation. Seth joined the vanguard from the beginning. Fire attacks were not very effective in this kind of climate and with that kind of opponent. The wyvern blade was also not a good choice. The opponent had no blood and was especially resistant to bladed weapons as it was wholly made of rock. With this kind of level difference, the dragon might was also not going to work. Who would have thought that big stick energy with the staff of Seth would be his best option at one point? Interestingly enough, like Seth, the Tyjark also possessed a wide array of weapons for every situation. The Guardian had pulled out all kinds of maces and warhammers. Tekka wielded one shield and the crow's beak Seth had given him. The terrifying mouth was the most dangerous part. The second dangerous situation was to be brushed by the body moving at high speeds as it tunneled in and out of the ground. The only strategy the cat elder knew was brute force coupled with magic. The vanguard would smash the bigger rock and the caster would use water and ice magic to blow away and bind the smaller gravel. Bit by bit the giant stone worm shrunk. It would have been a lot easier if the beast could not heal by replenishing the stones by feeding on the surroundings. On the other hand, the fight was a lot less intense than the battle with the trolls. Supported by the huge ration of potions, they managed to grind the giant stone worm to dust. It slowly became dark as they fought the beast for hours. When the rocks finally stopped moving and the kill notification rang in their ears, they heaved a sigh of relief. All tension fell off them and they fell down on their butts. Unfortunately, it did not drop a soul or any really useful materials except a high-rank beast core. It was too late to keep going and decided to camp there. As they were eating at the campfire, Drosy approached Seth. "I'm really sorry. You were right. Setting flags is a stupid thing and shouldn't be done on purpose just to play with fate. There are still things to learn, even at my age." He. The mountains were bitter cold with biting winds for the caravan, but no monsters attacked. Surrounded by the circle of carriages, the wind couldn't harm. The big fire and thick blankets did the rest to make the night comfortable. Drosy had learned his lesson and the night stayed quiet. Chapter 225. For we are jolly travelers. Seth woke up early and sat on the roof of the armored carriage. It was the first time he could really take in the view. Below he could see the serpentines they had traveled within the fields of snow and boulders. Past the snow and desolate rock were the lush forests that covered almost everything up to the horizon. And at the horizon, he could make out the silhouettes of Y. City as the sun slowly started rising. Like warm honey, the light of the sunrise washed over the world and brought a slight warmth with it. The camp slowly awoke with a low grumbling of voices. Nobody had slept too well, except for Seth had warmed himself with his own fire. The mood was on the rise after everyone had breakfast and got ready for departure. According to Allison and Link, it would become even colder before they came into the vicinity. And it came as they had foretold. It became so cold that people had to drink the prepared cold resistance potions. Everything went smoothly until they came into a strong snowstorm. Allison and Seth cast fire shields and fire rain to resist the weather. Otherwise, they would have had to stop and wait until the storm was over. The spells of and from his gloves' effects had been unlocked when his level increased. But the next problem did not wait long to appear. Seth's shield got a hit but withstood, Allison's shield got a hit and broke. They heard a scream from the carriages in the back. Looking back, they saw one of the cat scouts heavily bleeding from the side. Something had attacked from the middle of the storm and vanished before they could react. Allison recast her shield and added several of the other elements, the other casters did the same and added shield of their respective expertise. Several more impacts could be heard, but the shields held up. They didn't know what was attacking them and it was too dangerous to enter the snowstorm with zero vision. Seth lowered the power of the shield in his area and fully activated Iavagus. He had trained to get used to the 360 degrees field of view and could endure it for several minutes. He saw far, he saw sharp, and he was not impeded by lacking light. Clear sight saw through the illusion, and a short time later he finally spotted something. The shields were constantly hit as if they were looking for a weak spot and he had made one for them. A disturbance in the storm warned him and he saw an illusory figure shooting towards him. Like the specter of a skeletal wolf, it dashed into the shield and broke through. Aiming for Seth's nape, it opened its maws only to swallow a fire lance suddenly launched from its target. Seth closed the door he had made and caught the specter. The lance exploded in the ribcage and dealt massive damage to the immaterial fiend. Its posture in the air was broken and Seth could simply catch the remnants. The moment he grabbed what was left of the beast, he felt that he could use on it. The moment he harvested the soul, the rest of the body disintegrated into nothingness. The description was similar to those of the ice trolls, but the affinity to ice seemed stronger. Only after calmly checking the item info did he notice the shocked expressions of the people around. He restricted his vision again and smiled at them apologetically. It seems like those things are a kind of snow spectre. Maybe they dwell in the snowstorm itself. Yes, I heard of that kind of undead. The lingering souls of creatures are assimilated by the snow and gain a physical form when the snow is roused by a strong wind. We should be careful and get out of the storm as fast as possible. Drosy commented. Seth agreed. The souls were interesting but too hard to harvest. He could not risk the caravan and his journey just to harvest souls. The line of carriage hurried along the barely visible road. Under the protection of the magic shield, they managed to escape the snowstorm. While they were driving out of the snowstorm, Seth thought of what the old cat had mentioned. If a simple storm could rouse harvestable undead, maybe he could. Tilda, forget about it. You can't harvest these souls manually, Tilda. Tilda, why not? Tilda, this time Seth made sure to only answer in his mind. Tilda, this only happens in mountains heavily charged with magic. And even in this environment, this is rare at best. Trying to replicate this phenomenon has no hope. Believe me, I tried. Tilda. Tilda, mountain heavily charged with magic. Tilda, Seth became suspicious. That sounded dangerous. Tilda, I see your thoughts, it's not like that. It only means the mountain is a very strong reservoir of magic. Tilda. Tilda, how can there be a reservoir of magic? I thought magic came from the portals. So, how? Tilda. Tilda, you know about the dragon veins, right? The mana circulation works similar to that of water. Magic will run along the dragon veins like rivers and pool at places of power, like this mountain range. From here the magic will start overflowing and saturate the air. The integration into the pathworks only reignited a spark that had lost all light. Mana is the life force of a planet. But similar to any other energy, it is not infinite. It differs from world to world, but yours was simply dead before. Tilda. Seth more or less understood the explanation, as it was similar to the theory of enchantments. Tilda, still, this mountain is abnormally saturated. Tilda. Please don't say something like that. Seth had learned that abnormalities foretold nothing good. What if the mountain really exploded or something like that? They had just entered the snow region and would travel through it for several days. Several hours later they met with Link, and his scouts waiting for them on the road. There was no problem healing the injured scout and the troop had scouted the way forward. Up ahead we found the camping site I told you about. Link reported to Seth and the caravan leader. Those were good news as daylight started becoming sparse. It's just that there are already people there. They look like a merchant caravan. Maybe they are going in the opposite direction. Drosy and Seth made eye contact. Let's be careful. They continued and reached the campsite before nightfall. It was a small plateau that was open toward the road but protected from the wind by the rocky cliffs around it. Seth and Drosy stepped forward to greet the caravan leader of the other camp who came forward as they arrived. Greetings. I'm Kizaz, a merchant from Delta. To whom do I have the pleasure of speaking? Now they were close enough that Seth could recognize the man's face. His skin color was slightly off with a blue tint. He had long gray hair and a white goatee. A pair of really small, cute horns grew on his forehead. Was here, demon. Greeting, my name is Drosy, the caravan leader of the Tyjark. This is Seth, a travel companion. Nice to meet you. I hope you don't mind sharing this camping site with us. Of course not. Please feel free. I would be happy to accommodate you. The more the merrier. The demon's pearly white teeth shone in the twilight just after dusk. Seth's caravan parked on the campsite beside Kizaz's people and got ready for the night. Chapter 226. With blades of iron. Tilda. Seth woke up from a deep sleep in the middle of the night. He came out of his tent and saw the rest of the caravan already on their feet. A loud echoing chanting that was resounding through the mountains had woken up everyone in the camping site. High above in the air floated a figure in flowing, windswept robes. The dark blue fabric obscured the figure's face, but the chanting was clearly coming from it. Seth knew the language it was chanting. It sounded exactly like his smithing ballads. The chant stopped for a moment and a glowing red magic formation appeared on the ground below them. The formation followed a heavy pressure that made it hard for anyone to move. Seth felt a weakness and tardiness take over his body. He was hard to think as if he had honey in his head. His movements were impaired as if he was moving underwater. 15%. Seth was LV 42 and still had a 15% increase. How high was it with the lower level? Ha ha ha, there is nothing you can do anymore. Tonight, I shall sacrifice you as the energy source of my spell and open the gates to immeasurable treasure. Rejoice. Your death will be for a greater cause. The chant ended and a terrifying rumble filled the world. The ground vibrated and they soon saw the cause. A white wall of torrential snow was rushing at them from the mountains above. A massive avalanche was coming down to crush everyone at the campsite. Shields. Set up the shields. Drosy screamed and broke the silence. Casters and caravan people hurried to set up their shields and the barriers of the carriages. Tekka even stalked to the edge of their circle and activated the barrier on his shield. When the masses of snow came upon them, the night became even darker. Like a tsunami, the avalanche threatened to smash the shields. Tilda, hurry and activate your fire shield. And add your on top of it, if you want to survive. Tilda. It was a possibility Seth had felt but avoided since the magic would use several times the mental energy and mana. It was not the time to think of the cost. Seth cast the fire shield but used to infuse it with soul fire. The hemisphere of fire shone bright like a flash and covered the campsite just before the avalanche hit the barriers. The snow instantly vaporized when touching the barrier hot enough to melt steel, resulting in a steam explosion that stunted the inertia of the avalanche. In a matter of seconds, he was sucked dry, and the barrier vanished. Seth's shield did not hold long, but it was enough to stop a lot of the force the snow masses initially had. All the barriers now had to do was withstand the weight. A massive headache assailed him, and he had to sit down, as he watched the snow pile up on top of the dome. It reminded him of the waters that had swallowed Starter. The casters did their best to supply the barriers with mana, but the sound cracks could be heard all over the place. The formation that was still weighing down on them did its best to hamper their efforts. But the barriers held on, for now. Ha ha ha, you think you can survive? Nobody will survive. All of you need to die here. The voice penetrated even through the thick snow and barriers. The next moment they heard the impact of projectiles and the coughs of the casters that maintained the shields. Seth just wanted to summon his trusty like when the impact suddenly stopped, and a voice was transmitted to them. Tilda can you hear me? This is Manila of the Mount Arra people. Please stay calm and persist. We will start measures to remove the snow mass now. Tilda. What was going on, was written on the face of everyone present. The situation did not worsen, so they decided to wait. Nobody had a better idea anyway. The magicians kept drinking mana potions while the others could only wait and resist the magic formation. What do you think? Drosy had shuffled beside Seth. Both were not in the best condition. One had blasted everything he had and was now down with a headache, while the other needed to maintain a huge shield, or else they would be crushed. We can only hope they really are friendly. In the meantime, we could try to do something about this formation. Unfortunately, I am not very educated in this kind of magic, Drosy admitted apologetically. Don't worry, I have an expert. Tilda L. Tilda. Yeah, try scouting the camping site for me so I can get a better view of the set. Up. Tilda. Fighting against nausea and his pulsating head, he started stumbling around the site following the directions of the sorceress. Most people he came across were close to a mental breakdown, especially those from the other caravan. His party and the Tyjark fared just fine. Most of them had a level that would allow them to survive even if the snow came barreling down. Tilda. Okay, I got it. Assemble the party, we have to destroy some focus point to deactivate this thing. Tilda. The party and guardians of the cat people came together, and Seth explained her instructions to them. Bluntly speaking, this magic formation was a spell that needed a lot of preparation. As long as they destroyed the precious materials that acted as a focus for the formation, they would be able to deactivate it. Destroying them was easy, but knowing their location was the hard part. The light had already solved this riddle and sent the minions out to do the dirty work. In a matter of minutes, the formations below their feet dimmed and everyone could move and breathe comfortably again. Maintaining the shields also became easier without the formation's debuff. All that was left was waiting and hoping their helpers were not actually their executioners. The light of morning was breaking through the thinning snow layer, and they could see water running down along the barriers. Seth had napped for a while and was woken by a ray of light when the top of the dome was free of snow. Hello. This is Manila. Please persevere. We have reached the barrier and should be able to excavate it soon. The snow pressing on the shield slowly melted away under the magic of the helpers. They could finally see the faces of the people who helped them after the caravan was freed from their cold grave. The Mount Arra people were clad in thick padded leather armor, that protected against weather and attacks. Manila, who had spoken to them, was a stocky middle-aged woman with a kind face. Some among the group were resting a little distance away. Blood had stained their armor. Drosy, Seth, and Nin, the representative of the other caravan, sat together with her at their fire and listened to what had happened above ground. The other people were unable to find the demon from yesterday, that was why Nin was chosen to speak for them. Manila told them that they were on patrol when they heard the weird chanting in the mountains. Mount Arra was one of the few places that had refused to relocate to the districts. She didn't go too much into detail, but she mentioned a sacred duty. They had lived in the mountains ever since. After the apocalypse, they made a deal with the Chrono Empire, just like Delta, and maintained security on these few viable routes that still connected the districts. In exchange, they were supplied with food, training, and gear. They even showed a certificate from the Empire which Drosy confirmed to be real. When they saw someone attacking the camping site, they immediately tried to apprehend the attacker. It was a vicious find and ended with the injured Midge being able to escape. Giving chase was only the second priority at that point as they hurried to free the caravans from the snow. She invited them to follow her and stay at Mount Arra until they recovered from this incident. The other caravan declined the offer as they wanted to get back to Delta as fast as possible. Seth and Drosy on the other hand welcomed the opportunity of a small break and trade. Chapter 227. And Hearts of Gold. The mountain people led the way riding on holy rhinos. The way was not long. They followed a fork in the road and arrived at a town around noon. It was a settlement at the side of the mountain with a giant statue carved into the flank rocky cliff. The statue depicted an anthropomorphic version of rhinoceroses they rode. Was it their local belief that had kept them here, instead of moving to the districts? The town was slightly damaged and antiquated when compared to modern towns. But one could see life thriving in this place. The caravan was brought to a hotel. The rooms were relatively clean and free to stay a night. The food was good, the beds were comfy. In short, Seth liked the place. The rest of the party also welcomed a relaxing stay after traveling through the wilderness for more than a week. After a long sleep and a good meal, he felt a lot better and hit the road. Seth went to explore the town. It was rather hard going on a sightseeing trip in the current world. The giant statue looked quite interesting. He knew that across the continent a lot of old ruins could be found, but how often would he be able to find one of those? Manila was in charge of their group, so he asked her about the statue and his thoughts from the day before. Ah, yes. That is so. Our people stayed because of the monument of Nazcan. You can go ahead and visit it whenever you like. I recommend going in the evening. The statue will give off a gentle humming sound that helps most people relax and calm down. He had asked the party and Ruby was excited to come along, which meant Tekka, Mary, and Jane had to come too. The statue was huge. At least 30 meters high and hewn directly out of the mountain. Ruby was running around it excitedly while Tekka could only smile wryly. There were some people around, kneeling on the step towards the statue, but nobody seemed disturbed by the little girl having fun. On the contrary, some bore a benevolent smile on their faces. When the sun touched the horizon, a low hum filled the place around and before the statue. Like the deep sound of a huge loudspeaker. Everyone had an expression of relaxation. Even Ruby quieted down. Everyone, except Seth. He heard the hum at first and then it started changing. A skill he had almost forgotten, had kicked in and changed the hum into understandable language. It was a big sigh followed by, "How am I supposed to help you, when you forgot the ability to understand me?" It kept lamenting about the abnormality of the situation and tried to ask why the dead world had suddenly recovered. But nobody answered it. Nobody could answer it. At least not until Seth went behind its back where he could not be seen. "Hey, can you stop whining? Your weird language is really ringing in my ears," he said, annoyed. "You can understand me. That's great. I need to ask a favor of you." Seth sighed. Maybe he should not have spoken up. "Okay, let's hear it." It explained a suspicion Al already had. The reason for the abnormal amount of magic in the mountain. Several thousand years ago, when the world's magic was declining, a powerful archmage had created a formation within the mountain to collect sparse mana in the world and send it to his tower. He wanted this power to prolong his life as much as possible. The problem was that nobody expected the magic to come back. The formation was way too powerful right now and was going haywire. There was too much mana for the pipeline. If it was not deactivated, it might come to a meltdown and create a magic storm that will destroy this mountain city. The statue somehow read Seth's expression, who was anything but happy about a sudden adventure. "I'm not telling you to do it for free. You are a blacksmith, right? All your items carry your aura. If you go down there, I am sure you can harvest a lot of precious materials from the formation and the pipeline. You might even be able to find a way to his magic tower. He was very rich and should be quite dead by now. He won't mind you taking his stuff." Seth thought about it for a moment. It wasn't like they were in a hurry to get to Delta and he could ask Drosy whether he wanted to join him. They could leave the non-combatants in the town with some people. The totem explained to him the position of the entrance to the hidden formation and a quest marker appeared on Seth's map. "Remember, when you find the door, you have to chant the magic phrase to open it." Seth nodded and left to tell Drosy and the party about the quest. He was sure everyone would feel safer if they had some of the Tyjark guardians with them. He returned with the girls, Tekka and his daughter, and assembled the party to tell them about the quest. Everyone agreed to ask Drosy for cooperation. This was not about dungeons, so the danger of actual death existed. It was better to be too careful than to rush in and be wiped by an unknown variable. He spent the rest of the day talking and planning with his party and Drosy. The old cat was a true merchant. He immediately joined when he heard that there was no acute danger but probably a high reward. He also got Manila to join them. Whether she believed him or not was of no importance. She knew the surroundings and was a great help in planning their travel. They would leave Ruby, Mary, and Jane together with some guardians and the rest of the caravan in town. It would only be the party, Drosy, and a few cat guardians. Drosy would be able to fill the gap that Puffles left as a healer. The entrance to the formation was not too far away, but there were no paths leading to it. It would take several hours on foot to walk there in the snow. This path might very well be the most dangerous part of the quest. Seth had no doubts that he would be able to stop the formation. He had his cheat-like with him. And in the worst case, they could try to break it with brute force. Their company set off on the morning of the next day. They had no time to lose. The longer they waited, the more dangerous the formation would become. Chapter 228. Tower of Tom. Kizaz had several wounds, but the worst was the stab wound in his abdomen. He was bleeding profusely and teetering at the edge of death. What was that bright shield of fire? It had totally ruined his plans. He had spent months preparing this to break into the magic formation. It was the only safe way into the magic tower of Tom Willis, the last great archmage of this world. The demon's journey began when he came upon a man in Delta. It was a native squandering a huge amount of riches on drinking and women. It was obvious that he had gotten his hands on wealth only recently and was throwing it away with both hands. Kizaz had investigated him and found that he actually sold a bunch of arcane gold, a very scarce and expensive metal that could be used for all kinds of high-grade applications. He used alcohol and charm information from the drunk man. The other more than willingly bragged about how he had found the hidden entrance to an ancient passage below Delta. He talked about his great thief skills, with which he had strenuously managed to get past the traps at the entrance and found a few workshops where he found a good amount of the treasures he sold. But it was just the entrance area. He just didn't dare to keep going as his thief senses told him that the traps were too much for him. The man described a huge ancient tower inside a giant cavern at the end of a long bridge filled with traps. The demon followed the man's lead and found the passage, the plundered rooms, and the giant cavern. The ancient magic tower was covered in tiles of a strong saturated blue with golden accents and statues. It was surrounded by a vortex of magic that incessantly surged into the tower. A massive bridge led over a bottomless crevasse, and even the demon mage without thief skills could tell that this was suspicious. He tried using a clone to walk the plank and it was instantly crushed by a gravitation trap on the bridge. Here was no way to get past the bridge without the correct procedure. Instead, he returned to the abyss, the demon world. The demons had already visited this world before it lost all magic. The reason the demons lost interest after the magic waned was that they could end up stuck over there if they lacked the mana to open a portal. He actually found the history of the tower. The reason was that the owner did a lot of deals with the demons of that time. His name was Tom Willis, and he was the last great archmagi of the continent. The reason was that he worked actively on getting rid of all other magicians to slow down the decline of mana in the world. Tom Willis had found a way to gain eternal youth. As long as he had mana, he would be immortal. It was just his bad luck that he was born close to the end of the planet's lifespan. To elongate his life, he killed all his peers and plundered their riches. He had realized that the end of the magic era was near and used all the riches and knowledge he had plundered to build a mighty spire, that was fueled by 5 potent formations, in the center of the biggest mountain range. Like this, he could monopolize all the magic that was still left in the world and elongate his life for a long time past the dusk of magic. From these records, Kizaz got the idea to approach the tower through its connection with the power sources. It was not hard to find the entrance. The problem was that he did not know the code to enter. The only option was to open the way with force. But to do so he needed a lot more power than he could do by himself. To augment his lacking strength, he planned to sacrifice some useless bums he hired in Delta. That was when everything went wrong. If only these meddling kids with their stupid cats had not interfered. There was no way those cannon fodder could have resisted his strategy long enough for the mountain people to interfere. Now that the guards here were actively searching for him, all he could do was return to Delta for now. Maybe he could find a different formation to enter or a way to get past the bridge. Maybe he should find that guy again. Seth and his fellowship had finally reached the place of the quest marker. It was a wide smooth stone wall that had no indication of a door. He stepped forward to say the magic word. Please, nothing happened. Open. Say me, again, nothing happened. The party members looked away, feeling embarrassed for the leader playing around like that. Drosy was just confused as he did not know Seth's bad okays. Boss, you didn't forget the phrase, right? Monique was brave enough to voice their thoughts. Their leader sighed. Yeah. As you wish. Tom Willis, the immortal archmagi, was and will always be the greatest under and above the skies of this land. There, you happy? Spirals carvings appeared on the stone and formed the outlines of a giant double door. With a chink and a break, it opened inwards, giving way into a pitch-black hallway. They all stared at the tunnel as a wave of thick magic energy wafted into their faces. Tilda, stop standing around and hurry in. Judging by the amount of mana that just came out, it will only become harder to stop the formation. Tilda. The reminder of the sorceress brought them all back to the present. The tunnel walls were barren stone and gave no clue about what they were about to see. After a short walk in the dark, they entered a huge hemispherical room. It was at least 20 meters in diameter. The dome's roof was in golden sheet metal, while the smooth black floor was covered in silver inlays. At the center of the room, set into the floor, were 7 interconnected golden rings that kept rotating on different axes and formed a complicated sphere. The air in the room was so charged with mana that they could see a mix of blue and green stakes rotating in the room and being sucked into the sphere in the middle of the room. A thick golden pipe led from the sphere's frame to a huge door on the other side of the room. This was probably the tunnel that directly connected to the magic tower that Nazcan had spoken of. "Al, do you have any idea how to stop this thing?" Carefully. Seth asked his trusty pocket lexicon for all questions arcane. It would have been better if they found a way to slowly shut down the formation or put it on standby. Just destroying it could lead to unwanted results. Yes, Seth was concerned for safety reasons, not because it would be a lot easier to disassemble and harvest all the materials in the room if it wasn't torn apart by a magic explosion. The sheet metal and golden rings of the sphere were a material that was newly added to his material catalog. Seth was enchanted by this effect. One could say that the gold natural ability was what Seth could grant by infusing souls into items. If the item itself already had this kind of option, the effects would definitely stack. And the best part was that there was a lot of it. Most of the gold he saw in the room was rare-rated. But the smaller ring rotating in the sphere was actually made of epic material. He couldn't wait to shut down the formation and start ripping it all from the walls. Home, it looks like we were just in time. A day or two later and would not have been able to shut it down peacefully. Similar to how they had stopped the formation at the campsite, the like instructed them on what nodes to damage and which nucleus to destroy. Slowly but surely the magic within the room became less and the rings slowed down. When they finished the instructions of the sorceress, there was no more magic left in the chamber and the rings lay down, flush with the floor. The quest ended just like that. Peaceful and anticlimactic. What was left was to collect their spoils and completely take apart the formation. Seth took half the sheet gold and the 7 rings, while the cat people claimed the other half of the dome and the formation materials. Only after they divvied up the spoils, did they pay attention to the big door in the wall. They pulled on the rings of the doors and they opened silently. They stepped into an extremely straight hallway with the golden pipe set into its floor. What they left behind was a completely plundered and barren stone chamber. Not even the floor tiles were spared. Chapter 229. I think I know. I think I know where this tunnel is leading. Seth suddenly said after they followed the wide tunnel for 15 minutes. He had kept an eye on his map as they kept going forward. The path they walked pointed in a straight line towards the vicinity of Delta. If Seth was not wrong, they would be able to walk straight to a point in Delta through this tunnel. It was a shortcut. If the tunnel really led straight to Delta, they could reach the district in a day's worth of walking. But we can't be sure what is at the end of the tunnel. Are you sure there is a way to the surface there? Drosy commented. At the end of the way should be an ancient magic tower full of riches. That's what I was told. Maybe we should send someone to scout the situation, before going there with the whole caravan. Tekka suggested. I will go. Evie volunteered happily. She wanted to contribute to the party as she sometimes felt slightly redundant within the group. I can leave Flix with you and notify you through him about the situation at the other end. And even if there are traps, I can just revive. I'm the perfect scout for this, please let me go, she argued before anyone could even deny her request. Seth nodded. All right, it's time for the immortal witch to shine. Half of us should stay here and protect this entrance, the other half should return to notify the rest, that everything went smoothly. Drosy agreed to this, and their group split up. Drosy, Allison, Link, and some of the 3 of the Guardians would return to the mountain town. Seth and the rest would stay to guard the entrance and wait for Evie's message. As Seth watched Evie vanish in the darkness of the tunnel and Drosy walk down the snowy path, he got busy himself. What are you doing, boss? Monique asked curiously when she saw Seth pull out an item from his inventory. Mining, he answered with a smirk. In his hand, he held a mithril pickaxe enchanted with piercing and additional strength. Together with he could dig into the hard rock as if it was cheesecake. The reason for his sudden enthusiasm for mining was that he detected several deposits in the vicinity of the chamber. There were some he had not heard of before, like ore. There was also some, as the name suggested, was an uncommon variant of copper with a strong affinity to water and frost, while was an uncommon metal with constantly changing properties. Evie. The tunnel was dark and without light, but it did not affect Evie. Seth had given them pendants with night vision before, so she could see clear as day. It looked like a huge maintenance tunnel, just very empty. Evie walked for several hours without reaching an end. She kept using to look for traps, but there were none. There were also no forks on the road. It was simply a very straight hallway. She started getting very bored after walking so long in the empty tunnel when she finally saw a gate at the end. It was made of forged bars and had a golden hue. It was not locked but stood ajar as if pushed open by the wind. or left open due to negligence. She passed the gate, walked up a staircase, and entered a lavishly decorated room. A heavy aura of mana and magic permeated the air in the room and made it hard to breathe. The golden pipe she had followed met 4 others in the middle of this room. Cables left this joint and vanished into the ground, making it look like a cyberstar. She found no danger or security measures that were activated. She lacked the skill to know where exactly she was, but she was certain that there was no immediate danger here. Seth. The hemispherical chamber looked like the center of an anthill with several entrances to tunnels and passageways Seth had dug in the last 8 hours. He only took a break when he was hungry. The other could only watch in awe as the blacksmith dug through hard rock like a mole. Mining was surprisingly fun with adequate skills. And harvesting ores for blacksmithing put the cherry on top. He still had little idea about what he would do with this stuff, but there was nothing wrong with collecting it first. It felt great picking up riches even if he didn't know what to use them for, yet. Seth had been digging for 12 hours straight without pause when Felix suddenly jumped up and notified the group that it was safe. Seth looked at his map. He had harvested most of the deposits he could find in the range of the chamber. He chugged a stamina potion to get awake and wiped off some of the dirt. Okay, I will go over. Then we know where exactly the tunnel leads to. Are you sure? Jonah asked. Yeah, don't worry about it. Seth took a little longer for the way as he kept digging up stuff here and there. The metals and stuff surrounding the tunnel had probably been charged by the mana of the formation. While Seth was on his way to the tower, someone else was also doing their best to be the first there. Kizaz had managed to more or less heal himself and hurried back to Delta. It took him a full day to stumble back into the district. He needed a way to get past that bridge, and his only clue at this point was the guy who had originally found the entrance the first time. The demon had been suspicious of the amount of gold that had supposedly been stored in the unprotected workshops. The demon rushed into a bar. He had searched through several bars to find the drunkard. He grabbed him by the collar and cast a quick illusion spell. There was no time to waste this time. The demon also found out that not just the formations, but the tower itself might also overload soon. How did you manage to enter the entrance? He found the answer around the man's neck. It was a necklace he had stolen somewhere in Delta. It acted as a key, opened the door, and deactivated the traps at the main entrance. The little bastard had hidden it before. With this, he could enter the tower without any problem. He should have taken control of the guy from the beginning. The demon bought some high-grade healing potion and recovered from his injuries before leaving for the main entrance to the magic tower. Just as expected, the necklace reacted to the formations at the entrance. It was like a backstage pass, but the true challenge was the bridge. Sweat covered his forehead. He had no time to come up with a better method. The demon closed his eyes and stepped on the bridge. A huge load fell off his heart when nothing happened even after several moments. It seemed safe. He could finally get to the tower. Just thinking of monopolizing all the riches of the ancient magician made his heart palpitate. He fell into a joyful sprint and attempted to cross the bridge when he suddenly heard an alarm. Oh no. The stone slab below his feet suddenly vanished and a magic circle lit up around him. He felt a tremendous gravitational force pulling him down, accelerating his fall. Like a bullet, he was shot into the abyss below the bridge. Chapter 230. Tower Defense. Seth arrived at the gate after about 10 hours after he set off. He had kept an eye on his, and to his happy surprise, he had gotten closer to Delta in a straight line. When he arrived, he was almost directly below Delta. Evie waited for him at the top of the stairs. She had not moved from the junction room and instead opted to get some sleep there. Her wards had notified her of his arrival. Tilda, oh ho. This is quite the construction. A true artist built this thing. Tilda the like admired the construction. She could already see more than the 2 noobs, even though they had only entered the basement. I looked at the rooms ahead but it does not seem like there are any active traps. Tilda, maybe the tower system was deactivated when the power ran out and did not boot correctly when the formations supplied energy again. I'm sure there should be measures, especially at the tower's power source. Tilda. That makes sense. Seth nodded. Then we should be able to move freely. Seth had hoped, but Els also popped his bubble immediately. Tilda, keep your guard up and be careful. There is a chance that the most important systems are still functioning even after an incorrect reboot. Tilda. Evie and Seth carefully continued to explore the place. Which meant that the immortal witch scouted for traps while Seth followed behind her. The interior design of the hallways and rooms was regal with a lavish design. It was impossible to say how old everything here was. Thick layers of dust covered the furnishing and polished floors, but they could not diminish the elegance of the place. Seth was slightly disappointed as the golden accents and ornaments were at most regular gold. His taste had evolved and looting normal gold was not worth his time, for now. The tower had all kinds of rooms and facilities. Even the great sorceress was impressed by some of them. Tilda, look for the control room. It doesn't seem like there is a tower master right now. We could take control of this place. Tilda. Seth wanted to settle in Delta, to begin with. Simply taking over a ready-made nest sounded like a good idea. The magic tower seemed quite really useful. Do you really think we could take this thing over? Tilda, find the control room and I'm sure I can do something. Tilda. Seth shrugged his shoulders and they kept exploring. They needed to find an exit anyway if they wanted to use this route to get the whole caravan to Delta. If he could get a free high-grade property in Delta, he would not say no. Free real estate was the best after all. He could hear the quiet whisper in his ear and grew more and more fond of the idea. He caught himself thinking of the dust-covered building as if it was his already. Seth was even glad he had not ripped off the decorations. It would have been annoying to reinstall those. The tower even had a vintage elevator in the center with intricately decorated doors and a caged shaft. The marble staircase wound up around the elevator shaft. It was a very classy design. They ascended the stairs several times before the witch suddenly called out from the front. Is this the control room? Evie suddenly asked from the front. The room seemed close to the top and occupied the whole floor. It looked empty except for a big crystal ball on a stand in the center. In the dim light that lit the tower, they could see the contours of the giant cavern. The whole tower was hidden below the earth. Tilda, yes. This should be it. Seth, go and touch the orb. Tilda. He felt a little suspicious but did what the sorceress asked him to do. The moment he touched the orb, a powerful shock shot through his body. Tilda, great, the tower was ownerless. Put some drops of your blood on the orb to complete the connection. Tilda. Seth didn't really understand what exactly was going on, but if he had to guess he would have likened it to a crashed computer. The tower system had broken down and needed a complete reboot to the factory setting. This gave him the chance to become the new owner. He slightly cut his arm and let the blood flow on the orb. New tower master has been registered. Tower system will now reboot, a pleasant female voice said. The next moment all the indirect light in the tower went out and left them in absolute darkness. Some moments later the lights came back on a lot brighter. Even the cavern outside was now discernible. The voice spoke up again. This is the tower system. Please enter the name of the new master. Seth Smith. Seth Smith has been registered as the new tower master. Would you like to rename the tower system? Miner's March, Seth said after wrecking his novel knowledge. It meant something like Tower of Earth or Tower of Home. He liked both translations. The tower was below the earth and might become his home in Delta. Miner's March has been registered as the tower's name. Setup complete. Booting system. Like a projector, the orb started shining light in all directions and holographic control panels and stations appeared in the room. System management, energy management, security system, maintenance system. Everything appeared for him and Evie to see and get familiar with. Al helped a lot in understanding the functions. Although the design itself was different from the one usually used in her world, an expert would be able to understand a similar system much faster than total noobs. With her instructions, Seth powered down the formations to stop those from going berserk. With the current mana saturation in the world, the formation only needed to run at 15% performance to fully power all the systems of the tower. Next was configuring the security system. The only partially functioning security system was now fully reactivated with the maintenance system working on repairing any damages. He cleared EV, so traps and other measures would not activate to her. The security measures along with their caravan's tunnel also stayed dormant. The maintenance system also got to work and cleaned the interior, aside from repairing damages. To Seth, this felt less and less like magic and more like science fiction at this point. It was a lot like a computer system and might have been a lot harder to operate without his that allowed him to understand the ancient language. Attention! A visitor with an outdated identification token has entered the premises. Please confirm the visitor's status. A video screen popped up in front of him and showed a pale blue demon sneaking towards a giant bridge. It was the caravan leader that had vanished during the attack. Seth was not the most intelligent, but he also wasn't dumb. It was probably this demon who had tried to sacrifice them and now he tried to sneak into his new home. Visitor rights are revoked. Get rid of him. Seth tried to give a command. He didn't know whether he needed to use specific commands, but the tower seemed to understand. Still, what happened surprised Seth a lot. The floor below the man vanished and he was catapulted into the abyss between the tower and the entrance. Seth knew the entrance was in that direction because of the mini-dot map of the tower floating beside him. With that, he could even micromanage the whole building's functions. Good, since we have full control of the system now, we should notify the rest of the guys to follow. This way is by far easier than traveling through the mountains above. I will notify Felix. Evie said, motivated to help. If everything went smoothly and the guard at the formation notified the rest of the party, it would take about a day for them all to arrive at the tower. This gave Seth enough time to have some sleep and explore the functions of the tower in depth. He yawned. No matter how many potions one drank, they could not substitute real sleep. The master seems tired. Would you like to teleport to your private quarters? Chapter 231. Squatting the spire. Teleport to the private quarters. As you wish, Master. Seth vanished from the control room, leaving a confused Evie behind. He appeared in a spacious bedroom. The air was slightly scented with the smell of herbs. Just a touch to test the softness of the bed weakened his knees. As if all his bones liquefied, he slid onto the bed and fell asleep. There was no fighting the fatigue. When he woke up, it was as if no time had gone by. But there was no fatigue, and he was wide awake. Had he really slept? He didn't feel like he slept. Tilda, hey, you finally awake. You slept like a log. Tilda the like teased him. So he had slept. He stood up and started exploring his private quarters. There was a cupboard full of robes fit for a tall magician. At one point they might have been powerful items, but over a long time of negligence, they had lost all their effects. Now it was just fancy fabric. When he stepped out of the room, he came face to face with a giant vault door. A very interesting looking, very big vault door. It also looked very safe. Tower. Yes, Master. Say, what is behind this door? That is your treasury, Master. Would you like to survey your vault? Seth's eyes lit up. The tower came with a treasure. Great. Yes, let's take a look inside. The vault door opened and the treasury inside was almost empty. What did he expect? His disappointment was short-lived. The golden bars and statues within the almost empty vault were epic arcane gold. It was his first epic material. If he melted down everything in the vault, he would definitely get about 30 bars worth of arcane gold. This was worth to be stored in such a vault. And he didn't have to share it with anyone. This was when he remembered that Evie was still alone somewhere in the tower. Tower, can you port me to my companion? Affirmative. In the blink of an eye, he stood before Evie, who let out a shrill shriek when he suddenly appeared out of nowhere. She had been worried and anxious and was tired after waiting for several hours. Sorry for letting you wait, he apologized. It is okay. At least I can rest now, she said with her eyes almost falling shut. Tower, do we have guest rooms? Could you port us there? Affirmative. With that the young girl and Blacksmith disappeared from the control room and appeared in a comfy bedroom. The witch looked around in surprise and slightly blushed when she realized that they stood in a bedroom. Have a good night. Tower, get me back to the control room, he said in a hurry when he realized her misunderstanding. Affirmative. Teleportation was very handy. It was a shame that teleportation would not work outside of the tower. It was his first question after Evie was gone. He could not use the tower's function to simply teleport the rest of the caravan from the formation to the tower. At least the long maintenance tunnels made sense now. He had slept for maybe 6 hours. It was not long and also not short. It would still take a while for the rest of the caravan to arrive. Enough time to explore the tower on his own. Using the tower's mini-map, he could teleport wherever he wanted. Wait, if I can teleport wherever I want to go, why does the tower have an elevator? It could have been a substitute for teleportation in case there was not enough mana for that function. But it was enough for Seth to check the elevator. And he was right. The elevator had one floor more than what was shown in the mini-map. It was labeled with 1 in a different number system. Seth pressed it and could see his own position moving up in the tower's map. The highest floor of the tower was the private quarters, and then came a lot of stone and earth after he left the mini-map. After 10 minutes of watching rough stone walls fly by, he became bored. It took another 20 minutes before the elevator came to halt in a small chamber with classy wood paneling. The bars of the elevator opened, and the wood paneling swung open like a door. What came into view looked like the lobby of a high-class hotel or a luxurious apartment building. He stepped away from the elevator and the door closed behind him. Seth was impressed by the modern design of the lobby, and he saw a busy city outside the wide glass doors. Hey, did you just come out of that elevator? He was suddenly asked as he was still looking around the room. His eyes widened. On the great stairs up stood something he had not seen in a long time. Not since the world had fallen. The woman that spoke to him was a typical cybergoth with pale skin, black makeup, and dark green hair. She wore revealing black clothes and wide black pants with neon accents. Seth could only stare at her since all her clothes were uncommon and rare-rated, despite their modern design. The woman took this as affirmation. Ha ha ha. Oh my god. Serves them right. Now they will never have the tower, she said, laughing with schadenfreude. Excuse me, what is going on? Seth asked, confused. He was sure that this was Delta. His told him so. But everything seemed so normal, there was even a cybergoth here. It felt like he had just taken an elevator from a fantasy novel to reality. Don't worry about it. Follow me, I will get someone to explain everything. Seth shrugged his shoulders and followed her. It would take some time for Evie to wake up and for the others to arrive. He could use some distraction until the others came. He followed the cybergoth happily dancing along the stairs and corridors. Wait here. I assemble some people and then we can explain it all. The room had a floor of polished white marble and antique wood paneling. In the middle of the room stood a great piano. He took a closer look while waiting to meet whoever these people were. He had never learned to play piano, but who could withstand the urge to play around a little? There was a brass plaquette on the piano that reads, "To my dear friend Tom Willis. Tilda Mac and a date." Judging by the plaquette, this piano was over 200 years old. Someone had taken great care of it as it looked brand new. "I see you are appreciating one of our oh so precious collector's pieces. A remnant of our ancestors. Come, some people have already arrived. The rest will trickle in as we wait." The woman brought him into a great meeting room, with an old circular table. Some people were seated around it. "This is your seat." There was a high seat at the head of the table, and she pointed at it before standing to the side and leaning on the wall. Seth pursed his lips but followed her directions. He sat at the high seat and looked around the table. "Tilda, be careful. All these people are above LV 60, even that weird girl. Tilda." There were 10 other seats, with 6 being filled already. All of them wore more or less formal or business apparel and looked more than just unhappy. Their outfits were all rated and fit for magicians. It seemed that Delta did not lack a good tailor. Seth in his armor seemed a little out of place, but he rather stayed fully geared up. Another 2 people came in the next 10 minutes, and after about half an hour appeared the person everyone in the room had been waiting for. A tall, pale man with long blonde hair and handsome feature walked in through the door. "Tilda, stay vigilant. That guy is a vampire over level 70. Tilda. I'm sorry for being late. Is this him?" "The new heir," he said and pointed at Seth. The next moment he felt as if being observed by appraisal, but the handsome man made a stupid face. "All right, then. Keep your secrets," he said with a smile. "Tilda, I blocked his appraisal for you." "Tilda." The vampire took his seat opposite Seth. "Lady, would you join us at the table? This concerns you, too." "No, I'm good over here," the cybergoth girl said and stayed leaning against the wall. "Do as you wish. Since everyone is here and our new friend is probably quite confused by everything right now. Let's begin the acknowledgement of the new heir." Chapter 232. Mine. 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 Seth kept watching as if they were enacting a play for him. He didn't want to disturb their performance. The vampire had acknowledged his existence, but he stayed silent. He wanted to see where this was going. "I know this might seem very confusing to you now. You probably found the tower on accident and touched the orb. That is okay. I don't accept it. Uncle. He's not a family member, he has no right to inherit the legacy of the Willis family." A young intelligent-looking man with jet black hair spoke up. He looked calm and collected with his glasses and the black cool coat. His temperament on the other hand seemed rather explosive. Others at the table were nodding silently in agreement. His uncle answered him with a lenient smile. "The fact that he has the mark of the Tower Master means that he was already accepted. There is no changing that. All we can do is try and deal with this. I'm sorry, my young friend. This might be a lot now, so let me explain from the beginning." "But uncle." "Oh, shut up, Harold. It's not like you ever had a chance," the girl commented sarcastically. "The only one who never stood a chance was you, Li.di.a." He over-pronounced every syllable of her name. "I never even wanted to," she argued. "Ha ha, there is a difference between not being able to and not wanting to. We all know you never. Enough. Harold. Sit down." What followed was the explanation of the history of the tower. Their ancestor was a powerful magician who had built the tower to prolong his life. He built the tower in a solidified magma chamber right above a knot in the dragon veins. With the stored mana in the tower, he had lived for a long time even after all magic had vanished and the world was plunged into the Dark Ages. He had actually managed to persevere until 20 years ago. He had just barely missed the resurgence of magic by 2 decades. In the hundreds of years of his life he had kept teaching his children about magic in the hope to prepare them for a possible return of the mana. The family also managed to amass quite the fortune over the time of its existence. They were already in Delta before it was Delta. Before the districts were founded. The vampire was the grandson of this magician. He wanted to accompany his grandfather in his longevity, but the only possibility was becoming a vampire. Using the little bit of mana in a living being blood to sustain his life was his only option. But as a vampire, he was not eligible to become a magician and inherit the tower. When he felt his powers finally waning, my grandfather decided to seal the tower and prepare it for a possible heir. A talented magician would have been able to open the door to the elevator and inherit the magic tower and its powers. It seems you have found a back door. But I am sure we can find a solution. Tilda, so that's why all of them have a caster class. Haha, they must be really pissed. They tried hard only to have the prize stolen by an outsider. Tilda. Lydie was rolling her eyes while even the grumpy-looking fella seemed annoyed by the vampire monologue. "By the way, what is your name, young friend?" "Oh, are you done? This was a nice history lesson, but could you get to the point?" I didn't really get what you want from me. And you should introduce yourself first, before asking for my name. Seth answered seriously. The vampire looked surprised for a moment but went back to smiling amicably. It seemed he had realized that it was best to speak directly with the new tower master. Sorry, that was my fault. My name is Willis. And what we want is joint ownership of the tower, or at least access to it. You can call me Seth. Why should I grant you access to my tower? Your tower, a middle-aged man with an aged face and long oily black hair jumped up. Explosive temperament was a family trait. Calm down, Valen said, calm and quiet, but an invisible force pushed the man back in his seat and he was unable to resist. His face was twisted in anger, but he could do nothing but sit there silently. He turned to Seth. It is our inheritance after all. Isn't it normal to wish to regain access? I'm sure we can find a solution. Is it the massive source of magic it can collect, the facilities, or the vault's contents? What are you really after? Or is there a secret I didn't find yet? You are really direct. And not nearly as clueless as you might think. You won't be able to make even one step into the tower if I don't know what you want there. The cybergoth laughed at the side. She had a thief class and probably not the best relationship with her family. The vampire's eyes glowed up red in anger, but he immediately reined in his emotions. We are mostly interested in the facilities and the power supply. Grandfather had spent most of his riches at the time of his death anyway, he said with a sigh. All fakids had fallen, and the vampire wanted to make a deal. The fact that he had not tried violence convinced Seth that there was a problem if the tower master died. At no second did he believe this guy tried to do this peacefully out of his own volition. What do you think? Could there be something more? If they have the knowledge, then the power supply and facilities could be more than enough to make a fortune. The revenue could be comparable to the kind of big corporations in your world. Are you serious? It's pretty hard to collect mana on this kind of scale. Do you have the technology to commercialize the mana? Valen was surprised while the rest of the clowns sitting around the table looked as if a bug had flown down their windpipe. The eloquent vampire was speechless for the first time, which made Seth grin a little. What's with that smug face? Another one exploded. This time it was an old guy with almost no hair left. He looked like he would die of a heart attack any moment. The women beside him looked not much happier but tried to calm him down. So, you know. Good. Then this will be a lot easier. We can provide the infrastructure if you agree to supply the energy. All cordiality had fallen, and he spoke like an ice-cold businessman. Looks like he is serious now. What's reasonable, Al? How much is the infrastructure worth? 30%, 35% maybe. But I bet you could push them to 20%. It's not like you need the money. They on the other hand seem to be almost desperate. 15/85. 15% for you, 85% for me, he threw out there, and the room exploded. You little shit. Tower master or not, I will end you right now. All kinds of spells and magic lights started gathering in the room. Every person in the room was 20 levels higher than him, and their pressure was nothing to laugh at. But Seth was relatively sure they couldn't touch him, and if they really tried, he had an emboss up his sleeve. Considering this, Seth simply watched them putting on airs. When they finally realized their bluff wasn't working and the situation became awkward, the vampire stepped in with a sigh. Enough already. I'm sorry about them. You can't blame them, it was worth a try, right? Who would have thought you were this hard to crack? No offense taken, can we talk seriously now? Not today. It would be better to do this at a later time. I will have to convene with the elders first. Would you like to stay here as our guest? Seth looked at the faces at the table. No, I'm good. I will just return to the tower. I will return tomorrow, he said with a smile. He used the little gavel in front of the high seat. Conference closed, he said with a cheeky smile, and left the room. He had learned a lot today, and most of it was rather useless stuff. Only one thing made him happy from deep down within him. The tower was officially his and nobody could take it from him. He had an awesome, super-safe secret base. Once he settled in, he could probably call Finn and the others to follow. Chapter 233. Party arrived. Hey. Wait a moment. You did really great in there. I have never seen Valen speechless. The cybergoth followed behind him with a radiant smile on her face. Don't you mean Uncle Valen? Seth said with a laugh. Bah. That vampire is over 200 years old. I don't know what kind of fetish he has, to make everyone call him uncle. I'm not doing that, it feels weird. Noted. You are returning into the Batcave. That's the plan. You sure you don't want to have some fun on the surface before returning to the crypt? Are you very bored? Actually, yes. And you seem really interesting. Don't you want to have a look at Delta, or is there something important waiting for you downstairs? Seth had to admit that Lydia was right. Evie was sleeping and the caravan would take at least a day to arrive through the maintenance tunnel. He took a deep breath before answering. All right then. Show me around your city, he said with a smile. The woman's expression lit up and she led him back to the lobby and out of the doors. To Seth's surprise, Delta seemed completely normal at first glance. People wore normal casual clothes, the streets were clean and pristine. Nothing made it seem like there was a problem with random portals or dungeon breaks. At a second glance, all these casual-looking clothes were low-grade equipment. Uncommon, rated T. shirts, jeans, and jackets. Just like the clothes of the Cybergoth and the rest of the Willis family, everything looked normal but was a system gear. Another difference was the races that mingled with the crowd. They were hard to notice, as they easily blended in by wearing the same modern clothes as everyone else. Some animal ears here, some horns there, demons with pale blue or red skin. Some non-humanoid demons were more noticeable, but aside from some side glances, nobody seemed to care. Unlike Y.City or B.City, as far as he heard, here many races lived together. It must have been the influence of the Chrono Empire that had made a deal with the leadership of Delta and the demons. Who would have thought that there would be such a huge difference compared to Y.City? But even in Delta, some changes were straightforward and not to overlook. The magical shops and street stalls dominated the shopping district. All the new and magical professions had taken over the economy. Seth was especially interested in the material shops and other blacksmiths. It was a huge difference to Y.City where the public skill level was barely able to make uncommon gear. Here uncommon was good quality and some shops even displayed fancy rare weapons to attract customers. The weapons looked better than they performed, in Seth's opinion. But it seemed to work. The shops were filled with customers. Overall, the situation was similar to the human district of Arra, where most shops were run by aspiring blacksmith hoping to gain access to the dwarven city. Are you interested in equipment? You don't seem to need any new stuff, though. Oh, I'm just scouting out the competition. So you have a good crafter. You could say that, he said with a smirk. She probably thought he was a magician. The smile was replaced by a look of surprise. There was a shop full of pots, pans, and other kitchenware. It was the first time he even saw kitchenware with a rating. Why is that blacksmith shop selling kitchenware? He asked in surprise. Now Lydia followed him in looking surprised. Why wouldn't he? Chefs also need their equipment, don't they? There are a lot of these shops in further away from the center. Lydia was not an expert, but she shared what she had heard. Apparently, making kitchenware was a good practice for beginner blacksmiths to train their skills. It was a lot harder to make a weapon, so they were the financially stable alternative to start off with. Not every blacksmith had their own smelter, failing to make an item meant wasting material they had to sell as scrap. Seth started off learning making equipment using a skill common blacksmiths did not have from the start. The knowledge was so common, that nobody ever told him, who already knew how to make weapons. It never really came to his mind since all the kitchenware he saw was common and sold in general stores. He simply thought there was a different job like tinker who made those. Seth was not to blame, not even Link had asked him for cooking stuff. Interesting. Under the confused eyes of Lydia, he started to buy several different versions of pots, cauldron, pans, and knives. The price was several thousand credits. It was negligible. Although it didn't hurt Seth's finances at all, the shopkeeper was over the moon to have sold so much in one go. With all the stuff he bought, he could scan it and add the kitchenware to his and start designing better versions. Although he had never seen any enchantment for cooking, just with different materials he could probably optimize the function. Thinking about the possibilities, they kept walking around the shopping street until his eyes fell on a set of leather clothes. It was uncommonly rated and made of snake leather. He had seen it before. To be precise, he had made it. It was Mina's leather outfit he had made for her in Arra. What was it doing here? Can I help you? A quick clerk suddenly materialized and asked him from the side. He didn't see him materialize, but he also didn't notice him until he spoke. Ah. Hello. Can I ask where you got this leather armor? Oh, this one. It's a very good, uncommon .rated leather set from Namia. A very sweet cat lady that came to the city a few weeks ago sold it here. She was very sexy, at least 9/10. The last part he whispered into Seth's ears. Hearing his items and on of love appraised felt good, but it did not distract him from the fact that this meant Mina had come to Delta. If Mina was here, then the rest of the party was probably not far. His heart started racing. They had come several weeks ago. Their level was practically halved in this world. Who knew what could have happened to them? He had read and seen too much to stay calm. Are you okay? Lydia asked beside him. No. Do you have a way to find people in Delta? Official way or shady ways? Doesn't matter. Shady ones then. Yes, I know some people. But it's a little early. I can introduce them to you later. Good. They kept strolling around town, but Seth could not stop worrying until it was finally time to meet Lydia's contact. It was evening and she led him to a fancy-looking nightclub. It was really as if the apocalypse never happened. People dancing, drinking, laughing in an atmosphere of loud music and neon lights. Seth hated it. He would rather enter a damp dark dungeon than a damp dark disco. The only good part about this experience was that he could finally wear a set of casual clothes. Lydia had forced him to shop around among the fashion shops. The tailoring business was booming in Delta. It was the easiest field to fuse modern knowledge and the new arcane knowledge brought by the Chrono Empire. Now he wore uncommon rated jeans, a shirt and a jacket on top of Nadel's set. He was still like a sore thumb in this environment, compared to the happy cybergoth that was dancing her way through the crowd. Wait here for a moment. I will go and talk to them. With those words she left him at the bar. He stood at the bar and ordered a drink while waiting. He sipped on his glass when it suddenly fell to the ground. You gotta be kidding me. Entering through the door was a giant guy with broad shoulders and a sleek-looking young man in stylish black suits, a short woman in a fancy dress, a sexy woman in a small black one, and a tiny figure on the big guy's shoulder sparkling like a diamond. Bulko, Mike, Luxis, Minor, and Finn looking posh like celebrities had just entered the nightclub. They were led straight to the VIP rooms. Okay, we can go meet them now in the VIP lounge. Chapter 234. Caravan arrives. Seth. 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 Me. What is going on? He had already somewhat expected it, but the shady people Lydia wanted to introduce him to look for someone were the someone he was looking for. They were all leisurely sitting on the sofas in the VIP lounge as if it was their living room and had an assortment of alcohol on the table before them. Seth, the fairy brute, tackled his face, throwing him off his feet. On the ground, Finn realized that she had not held back and ruined the emotional reunion she had imagined. Finn is sorry. Seth, are you okay? She asked in a panic and squishing his face with teary eyes. I'm okay. Hey, pulse up squishy my face. Oh sorry, she said, embarrassed, and let off of him while Mike helped him up. It's good to see you again. Mike greeted him as he pulled him up from the ground. Yeah, I'm glad you guys are okay, too. Since when are you in Delta? 2 or 3 weeks, said a minor that had sneaked up on his side. She pulled him into an embrace and kissed his cheek. Bulko greeted him wordlessly with a wave. He was not a man of many words. Luxis also waved with a complicated expression. They were not that close, so she didn't know how exactly to greet him in a situation where he was already surrounded by people. The fairy, sparkling like a diamond in a dress set with rhinestones, had promptly changed her seat from Bulko's shoulder to his, while the others motioned him to sit among them. Lydia was unable to interject at all in this atmosphere. She could only watch with a confused look. Lydia, why are you standing there? Come on, sit down too. Mike finally saved her from the awkwardness, and he also sat down with them. Seth tried to ask them what they were doing in Delta, but Finn promptly changed the topic to him. The others joined in, and thus he was forced to recount how he was forced to return prematurely and his adventure since returning to Earth. Even with Lydia sitting among them, he didn't hold back. The fact that this party trusted her was proof that he did not have to be vigilant of her. In a sense, this fact made her more trustworthy as a partner in the cooperation with the Willis family than the day they had spent in town together. It was deep in the night and quite a few drinks later when he finally finished recounting his own experiences. Now, he got the chance to ask them what had happened to them. They were all quite drunk and kept intercepting each other. Even Bulko became a little wordier. The biggest surprise was Luxis. The elf had a strong reaction to Earth alcohol. Especially the cocktails with tiny pink umbrellas. She turned into a total extrovert and led the conversation. From what Seth could garner and remember later, the party had put a lot of effort into leveling up after he had left. It was Finn's idea to become super strong and surprise him. In that matter, the war with the demon worshippers in Namia was a blessing in disguise. Nothing gave such ample chance to level up like a war with strong enemies. All of them had reached LV 70 and became a rank adventurers. This would not have been enough to stay on Earth, where their level was practically halved. It was thanks to Simon and their contribution in the war that they were able to join a diplomatic dispatch and got a blessing that boosted all their stats while on Earth. With this blessing, their LV 70 was comparable to LV.65 on Earth. It made them into one of the powerhouses in Delta. The average level of Delta was 35.40, almost double that of Y.City. As such, they had a good time in Delta. They could enter almost untouched high-level dungeons and make a lot of money by selling materials and information directly to the continent's main branch of the Adventurer Guild. It was obvious from their outfit, but they kept raving about how they enjoyed this modern lifestyle of Earth. Technology was working just fine in Delta, and they told him about all the awesome technology he grew up with like they were religious fanatics. In the end, it became a really fun party and they kept talking and drinking until deep into the morning. When Luxis was the first one to puke, which prompted Mike and Lydia to follow suit, they took it as a sign. All of them were getting tired at this point and finally decided to meet on the next day after all of them had a good day of sleep. Seth had to support Lydia on the way back. He used his to find the way. Wow, she really overdid it again, huh, someone said sarcastically. When they came back to the Willis building there was already someone waiting for them. It was Harold, the young intelligent looking fellow with a nasty temperament. H stood between two elevator door and them. That's also good. I wanted to talk to you. Give up on the tower. PFF, no. Good conversation. Now step aside. I think you didn't understand me. You may not be afraid, but what about your friends? Did you really think you would be able to party this much without us finding out? Are you really threatening me with the lives of my friends? Yes. You are seriously threatening people that are part of a diplomatic delegation of the Chrono Empire. If you say it like that. Yeah, thought so. No balls. He simply walked past Harold and the elevator door opened automatically. He put Lydia in the elevator and turned back to the stumped Harold. But for the attempt. In a flash, he was completely geared up and swung Seth's scepter at Harold's waist. The magician hurriedly erected a magic shield to block the attack. The staff crashed into the shield, which immediately caved in under the blunt force and gave way for the attack. Harold had a high level but was obviously not very experienced in fighting melee battles. He could only shut his eyes tightly and wait for what was about to happen. Seth's attack stopped only millimeters before crushing the caster's waist. Take that as a lesson. You can't touch me, but don't think I won't get rid of you if you become a hindrance. With that, he entered the elevator and closed the doors. Tilda, hey, don't put me away every time you go out to have fun. I also wanted to see the city. Tilda the light complained. He had put away the token with most of his other stuff when he accompanied Lydia. Tilda, but how am I supposed to have fun if you are around? Tilda, he poked. Tilda, ouch. Very funny. Summon me and I will show you some fun. Tilda the sorceress answered provocatively. Tilda, no, I know, I might need you as a trump card anytime soon. Right. Yeah. Tilda. Tilda wimp. Tilda. Tilda nympho. Tilda. They kept bickering until they reached the tower. Tower, can you put her in a guest room? He asked when they reached the floor with his personal quarters. Affirmative. Also, your companion woke up, master. Lydia vanished and the tower informed him that Evie had woken up. A group of intruders is nearing through one of the maintenance tunnels. Oh, that should be the caravan, can you show me footage? A screen opened before him and showed his party and the Tyjark traveling along the tunnel. Those are not intruders. Register them as guests and let them enter. Send me and Evie to the control room. Seth. Evie called out when they both appeared in the control room. She was still wearing her cute pajamas and looked a little sleepy. She was awake but enjoyed the softness of the bed a little longer. Hi, Evie. I returned. I found a way to Delta above and the caravan will arrive soon. I also brought in a guest. Can you stay here and keep an eye on the situation? I really need to catch a wink of sleep right now. Oh, sure. Recover soon. Seth conferred her temporary operator rights and went to the private quarters to take a nap. He felt like shit when the tower notified him of the caravan's arrival a few hours later. He chugged a stamina potion to wake up and ported to the lobby to receive the people. Send the guys over once they are in range for teleportation. Chapter 235. Receiving guests. Seth and Evie waited in the entrance hall on the ground floor of the tower. I browsed the footage a little, while you took a break. The tower is really awesome. It even has all kinds of advanced facilities like alchemy labs and enchantment rooms. There are also several floors of storage rooms. Evie mentioned excitedly. With her temporary operator rights, she could check through the tower's systems, but not change anything or give commands. How about our guest? She was still sound asleep when I checked before you called me down. The guests are now in range. Proceeding to move them to the entrance hall. The party and caravan of Tyjark suddenly appeared in the spacious hall. The carriage would not have fit into the maintenance tunnel and was stored in their inventories. Some of the draft animals that were not registered as mounts had been led by a leash but were now stored in the tower's stables. Welcome to Miner's March, he said pompously. What happened? Some among the Tyjark were confused by the sudden transportation and the animals vanishing. He guards to a fighting stance, but Drosy and the party quickly recognized who had greeted them. Seth. Boss. Hey, you are finally here. Don't worry, it's a long story, but this place belongs to me now. When everyone recognized that there was no danger, but that they had arrived at their destination, their eyes filled with wonder. Especially the younger ones like Ruby and the kittens were looking around with big eyes. The entrance hall was richly decorated with exotic wood, marble, and gold ornamentation. After decades of destitution, everything had been polished to its prime when Seth reactivated the maintenance system. Everything looked new and impressive. Even the adults could not hide their admiration. Seth greeted Drosy and the party. All of them looked a little tired and his party members made no attempt to hide their relief to have finally arrived. You guys must be tired, how about you go rest and I will explain everything afterward. There are quite a few rooms in this place and they don't lag behind the entrance hall in luxury. Ruby's eyes sparkled when she heard about exploring more of the place. All of them gladly agreed and Evie went with them to choose rooms. She had made herself familiar with the tower's layout. Now, only Seth and the caravan were left behind. You own this. You made quite a big hole here. Drosy joked looking around. Yeah, I was also really surprised. But you are probably also tired from the journey. There are a lot of guest rooms if you want to rest. Drosy looked at the people of the caravan. After several hours of walking on foot, they were all tired. Even the children were fighting against their fatigue to ogle and explore the entrance hall. I will have to burden you then, he said with an apologetic smile. Seth understood the old cat's hesitance. It took quite a bit of trust, before staying in the underground bunker of their new friend with their whole family. Even if they got quite friendly on the journey, he had a lot of responsibility as the caravan leader. It's okay, my house is yours, too, he friendly patted Drosy's shoulder. Maybe they would stay for longer once they got a taste of the tower's luxury. It was his subtle hope to recruit the Tyjarch. Not because of their forces, even so, their guardians were undeniably strong. They were great merchants. Seth was sure they could help him build a distribution network. Not just for the items he was going to make to grind. Seth thought on a bigger scale. Link, Allison, and Evie were still at the starting point of their crafting skills. They would grind a lot in the future, more than their own party would ever be able to use. If he didn't want to just pump money into their skill growth, Seth needed a way to sell all the stuff. The most important reason he would have liked to work with Drosy and his people was that he had developed some trust in them on the journey. Seth would rather work with them, than with a stranger. But he couldn't rush this. Otherwise, he might ruin their relationship if he was too forceful. I appreciate it. They really need some rest. Seth personally accompanied them to the floors with rooms and helped them settle in. Once every member of the caravan had a room, Drosy and some of the guardians approached Seth. We would like to scout Delta, can you show me the way? Even if others rested, he had to do his duty as the leader. All they knew about this world until now, were things Seth had told them. Letting his people stay in his place was already a big loan of trust. It made sense that they wanted to see it for themselves and double-check the situation and the location. It was their duty, and it would calm their hearts, once they knew that Seth had told the truth. Seth gladly brought them to the elevator and accompanied them on the way up. Once they saw that he was honest with them, it would only help their relationship. Is this the only way to the city? Drosy asked. He was a little disconcerted standing in a cage that was slowly moving up through a tunnel. Oh, no. Don't worry, this is just the fastest. There is also the main entrance, which leads outside, but I have no idea where exactly it leads in relation to the city. Drosy calmed down a little. He preferred to travel with his people using carriages. Tyjarch had bad experiences with cages. It made the fact that he let his people stay at Seth's place even more significant. The ride took about 30 minutes. The cat people were visibly relieved when they reached the lobby of the Willis building and could leave the elevator. This is going too far. You are even bringing in pets through the secret entrance. This time it was the middle-aged man with the long oily hair he encountered. Seth waved at the man as if shooing away a pesky fly and led the cat people outside of the building. That direction is the shopping district and, that's all I know. This is my first time here, too. You guys can manage on your own, right? I have some people to meet. Seth and Drosy saw each other off and went their separate ways. Seth pulled out a smartphone from his inventory. It was Lydia's. He didn't steal it. She gave it to him so he could contact Finn and the others. Now that he could fiddle with one, he found that only the basic functions of a phone still worked. There was no internet connection or GPS function. Only calling, messaging and the native apps on the phone worked. He called Miner's number and let it ring for a few minutes. Who is it? Why are you calling so early in the evening? A grumpy cat girl grunted on the phone. Good morning, sunshine. I notice you have a great mood today. Wanna go and get breakfast together? Seth, she asked embarrassedly. Seth could almost hear the blood shooting in her face. Yes, breakfast. Of course. You should come to the embassy, and we can have a meal here. I will send you the map, she spoke in a sweet, hurried voice. All right, until later then, Seth said with a grin. Within a minute she sent him a message with the address of the embassy and a picture of a map. Miner had somehow remembered that he entered Delta through the Willis building. She sent him a cutout of a map that showed the way to the embassy. His updated and showed the cutout in his map view. It made it easy to find the way. It was some way from the Willis building. It was a rich neighborhood of big luxurious mansions and high-rises. The embassy was surrounded by a high wall with powerful magic and barriers. The gates were guarded by knights in shining armor. He greeted the guards and sent Miner a message that he was waiting at the gate. I'm there in a minute. A slightly disheveled and much less posh-looking Miner came rushing to the gates. She looked just like the typical Q neighbor girl in her casual modern clothes. It really dampened her feline vibe of danger and sexiness. She looked almost innocent. I'm here, she said, trying to hide how out of breath she was. They hugged and were on their way. Do you know a good place to eat? You were here for a lot longer than me. Mina's ears fluttered cutely as she thought hard about a place to go. Oh, I know, let's go. They talked a bit more about their experiences since they split up. A lot of yesterday's talks were lost to the alcohol, and they had a lot to catch up on. The restaurant they went to was small, but Seth had to admit that the food was superb. The chef was extremely skilled and there was a long queue in front of the place. They only got into the restaurant because Mina knew the people and they got a private booth. The conversation kept going without pause. They talked and talked. They talked all the way into the evening before leaving the restaurant and getting a room. It had been a long time since he last woke up in this room. Well, not this exact room, but a room like this. Clothes were lying all over the place and a soft warm cat girl was snuggling up against him. He really needed to keep leveling, if he wanted to keep up with his lover. Still, he felt great after finally being able to get some much-needed sleep. As he looked at the rising sun outside, it felt like he forgot something. The Tyjarch. Chapter 236. Settling in. Seth just got up to get dressed when Mina's phone started ringing. Sleepy Mina picked up. What is it? Where I am? I'm with Seth, why do you ask? What? Did you meet him without us? That's unfair. You were away a whole day having fun, while we had to take over your duties. Seth could hear Finn's agitated voice blaring from the phone. It seemed like Mina also forgot a few things for their date. Looks like we will have to separate for now, he commented after Finn had a real go at her. She looked up at him with hanging ears. Yeah, I guess, she said sadly. After getting dressed, Seth left the hotel and returned to the Willis building where he found a scene. What is going on here? What he came to was a standoff between Drosy and the 4 guardians he had brought and some members of the Willis family led by Fatty. Everyone had several kinds of wounds and looked very tired. They were obviously too tired to keep fighting and had come to a standstill. It took a while for them to even register that Seth was standing in the lobby, despite him having spoken up. Fatty, who had a few long claw cuts on his clothes, finally reacted to him. You. This is your fault. Who told you could bring in your little fur friends, huh? They came in here like beasts. Get them out of here. Tyjarch were just waiting in front of the building. How dare you lie and belittle us, a guardian spat out. Seth ignored the two and stepped to Drosy, who seemed to suffer from severe mana depletion. It was similar to when he depleted his mental energy. If one used up their mana, they would feel weak, out of breath, and very tired. There were also side effects from drinking too many potions if one was not careful. The cat was already quite old and had a hard time recovering from the effects. Drosy, how are you? Oh, Seth, there you are. We've been waiting, the elder pressed out. I'm sorry that I'm late. Come, I help you up. I'm sure you will feel a lot better after getting some sleep in a good bed. He supported the cat elder and the guardians followed him unwillingly towards the elevator. Where do you think you are going? Don't use our ancestors' heritage like some boarding house for aliens. Shut up. I will deal with you later. The elevator doors shut before anyone could speak up again and they returned to Mina's march. Seth really started to dislike the Willis family. Maybe he should not make business deals with them. He didn't like it, but the weird vampire Valen seemed like the only professional person up there. Boss. What happened? Where have you been? Evie and Jonah were in the control room when Seth arrived. Evie, can I leave them to you? Oh, sure. I actually saw medical facilities on the lower floor. Maybe you could send us there. In the blink of an eye, the cat people and Evie were gone from the control room. Boss, what's going on? Jonah asked once they were gone. Is everyone awake? Let's go and have a meeting. I will brief you on what happened in Delta and we can talk about what to do in the future. The party assembled. They talked about what happened. He briefed them of the Willis family and that he found his old party members already present in Delta. He also shared his thoughts about the tower and its future operations. He originally wanted to settle in Delta, get a building, open a store, and found a workshop. A place where Allison, Link, Evie, and he could improve their crafting skills in peace. The tower was a great find, that already came with everything but a store. He wanted to stay here and make it his base. Starting there they could keep expanding. He still had to talk more to Finn and the others, but he had no doubts that they would join him, too. A deal with the Willis family and cooperation with the Tyjarch was also a possibility. I don't know. The Willis family does not seem trustworthy. Allison commented. True. It might be better to look directly for contact with the Chrono Empire for an energy deal. She's right. The only problem is that the elevator leads straight into their home. Link mentioned. We should find a different way to Delta. I should be able to improve the teleportation system of the tower. It should be able to teleport directly to Delta. Right, she was an expert for almost anything magical. Owls also should be able to improve the systems. Am I interrupting something? Lydia stood in the door. She had woken up some time ago and had been looking around the place. She had accidentally come across the meeting. Oh, hey Lydia. We've been talking about how to get around making a deal with your family. Everyone grimaced when they heard Seth being so open but were surprised at the answer. Nice, let me help. Those stuck-up, entitled bitches don't deserve anything. She grabbed a chair excitedly and sat down among them. Don't worry. She's okay. Seth guaranteed for the cybergoth. He could already see Link's eyes glaze over. That guy was really a terrible womanizer. Or at least he thought of himself like that. Lydia was probably okay without his help. By the way, I couldn't help but hear a little about your plans. What's the name of your organization? Lydia asked innocently. Everyone looked surprised. They had just seen themselves as a party until now, but everyone realized that Lydia was right. Seth had always avoided joining something like a guild, but at this point, was there a difference? Don't tell me you haven't thought of a name. Doesn't even your party have a name? Her questioning eyes bore holes into Seth's soul. No, he had never thought of a name for the party, or a guild. We should wait for all members to talk about a name. I would not want to decide on it with just us. Seth found a convenient way to dodge naming them. Great. Back to the topic, maybe your friends can help get a connection with Empire. Didn't you say they were part of a diplomatic delegation or dispatch or something? Monique interjected. They kept talking about it a bit longer. The result was that they first needed to teleport to work for travel to the city. They could not use the daily home call just to travel to Delta. With a way to circumvent the Willis family, everything else would become a lot easier. Next, they would have to talk with Drosy once he recovered. And Seth needed to contact Finn and the other to see if they could get them connected with someone from the Empire. Let's start with getting a shortcut to the city. Al, are you up for it? Tilda, sure, but don't you dare ignore our deal. Tilda. Seth summoned the spicy sorceress. Like always when she made an appearance, nobody could take their eyes off her. Especially Lydia was flabbergasted by her. Okay, let's hurry. Give me administrative rights and I will take a look at the systems. Seth gave her the rights and she fell silent for the full hours of her time limit before she returned into the token. Tilda, this tower was definitely built by an expert. Originally the power was able to transport you anywhere in a radius of 5 kilometers. The problem was something in the city blocking its system's access. It is probably a measure of the Chrono Empire. Tilda. Everyone nodded. It made sense that they didn't want for people to willy-nilly teleport in and out of the city. Seth only experienced teleportation through the church. This was also the most common space travel in the Pathworks. But there were many other ways in the world. Just like how one did not necessarily need a priest of the church to open a portal. Powerful magicians could learn the spell and even create teleportation formations like in Miner's March. The fog travel of the Tuatha was another one. Who would want people like that to randomly visit? Tilda, I tweaked the tower's systems a little bit and scanned for an access point. It's common practice to implement one since teleportation is too convenient to not use. There is a reception hall at the system church that allows for teleport inside the city. You just need to get approval to connect. Tilda. This meant Seth was going to be busy today. Chapter 237. Settling in, 2. After the fun came the work. Seth knew what he had to do and would return to the surface. His first destination was the church. At least it would not be too hard to talk to the church, since he was already a member. Lydia accompanied him on the way up. She also had a life, or so she said. She would also take a look at the situation within the family. Seth had told her about what happened between them and Drosy. She had come to know some of the caravan during her stay in the tower and liked the cat people. She readily offered herself as a double agent. Nobody was waiting in the lobby when they left the elevator. They separated in the lobby and Lydia went up into the building. Seth didn't need her for what he needed to do. He already came past Delta's church building on his way to the embassy. On the way there he texted Miner for a meeting with the others. He also needed to share his plans with them. The reply came quickly. The party had duty today and could only meet him late in the evening. They had told him about their job during the party, but Seth could hardly remember much. They needed to protect some important person was all he could remember. When he entered the church an old acquaintance was already expecting him. Seth, a rotund old man with a Santa Claus beard, pulled him into a bear hug. Simon. Seth knew Simon was in Delta, but how did he know when Seth would show up in the church? It couldn't be that he stalked him. Or was the old man lurking in the entrance hall of the church like some creep, waiting for Seth to arrive? Seth, a shrieking bullet hit him in the cheek and threw him off his feet. Meanie. You met Miner without Finn. I think you broke my cheekbone. We should be even with that, what are you even doing here? Seth asked in plain pain. He got up and the fairy sat on his shoulder. Finn is doing her job. Tackling people is your job. No, Finn's job is securing the perimeter, she said with dangling feet. Hey, don't just dive into your own little world. I'm still here. Don't ignore me just because I'm an old man. I'm sorry. I'm glad to see you too. Still, how did you know I was coming, Simon? You didn't wait here ever since I wrote you, I would go to Delta, right? No. Did you think of me like that? I would think you are capable of anything at this point. I keep all possibilities open. Minor told me, okay. I am a proper priest of the system church and not some creep. Seth looked at him askant, but Finn was here, so Minor probably came by, too. It was possible that Simon's story was true. Does that mean the person you are protecting is here, too? Seth asked the tiny figure on his shoulder, but it was Simon answering. Yes, the fourth princess came to the church for business with the bishop. Cool, anyway. Since you are here, this might go faster than expected. I need a permit for your teleportation access point. Why would you need that? Don't tell me you became a wizard and learned teleport. No, that would be stupid. I found an ancient magic tower, took it over, and made it my base. Now I need an access permit so I can travel between the city and the tower below. Ha 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 ha. For a moment you had me. I really thought you were serious there, for a second. Well, it doesn't matter whether you believe me or not. How can I get the permit? Simon calmed down slowly. He noticed that Finn did not seem surprised at all. She looked rather proud of her friend owning a powerful magic tower. I can't help you with that. It's located in the church, but we don't give the permits. You are lucky, the person that could give you a permit is currently talking to the bishop. If you kiss her feet and beg, she might give you a permit. Haha, don't make that face, I'm joking. Just ask her normally. She's a very humble person. Seth calmed down a little. He really didn't have a thing for sucking up to someone. Maybe if she was cute, but he doubted a royal would let him go that far. You can just wait. Her Majesty and the other will meet up with me down here. In the meantime, how about a tea and a small meal? Simon suggested. He also wanted to hear about Seth's journey and that mysterious magic tower. If it was Samuel, he might not have told him, but Simon had proven often enough that he was a trustworthy friend. They sat down at a table in the lobby and talked over a light breakfast. Finn was gorging on a basket of cookies as big as herself. He asked what had happened to securing the perimeter and she answered. Isn't Finn currently guarding the two most dangerous people on this floor? How much safer is Finn supposed to make it? She grinned upon her own cleverness before sinking her face into a piece of cake. Sometimes wondered whether Finn was maybe eating like a duck and just swallowing. In these moments he was glad that he could not see the small fairy eat up close. If a normal dot-sized person ate like that it would be terrifying. After a while, they finally heard people coming down the stair and the rest of Ulicat's fur appeared with the princes in their middle. She looked like you would imagine a typical fairy tale princess. Not. The fourth princess of the Chrono Empire was a victim of modern fashion. A typical fashionista. As someone whose garderobe was filled with black T-dot shirts and sloppy sweatpants, Seth felt a cringe rending his heart. Another innocent soul had fallen into the grasps of a heartless industry. But Seth was not a hero. Although it hurt his soul, this was not his battle. It was not his duty to save her from her own mistakes. He just hoped he could get the permit quickly and leave. Finn. Where are you? Report. Mike was looking for Finn, who had just eaten her way into another piece of cake, like an insect that wanted to lay its eggs into the juicy, sugary treat. Seth. What are you doing here? I thought we wanted to meet in the evening. Mike exclaimed when he noticed Seth. He came over and saw the cake moving as if it was alive. He had smiled until now. He asked with an expressionless face. Is Finn in that piece of cake? Finn is. The fairy broke out of the creamy top of the cake. You were supposed to secure the perimeter. I did. Look. The most dangerous individuals are contained on this table. I cleverly used a breakfast to keep them in check, she jest half-jokingly, half-serious. And why did you join them? Mike asked, lifting one of his eyebrows. I had to join them. It was my cover to listen in on their dark schemes. Mike chuckled. And what dark schemes did they come up with? The old man told Seth to suck the princess' toes. Not true. I said to lick her feet. Simon interrupted indignantly. You did what? The princess joined the fray. Finn burst into a laughing fit when she heard the priest standing up for himself. Even Seth couldn't stay serious when he heard Simon and saw the princess's reaction. It took a moment before everyone calmed down enough to have a serious conversation. Chapter 238. Settling in, 3. So to recount. You are a blacksmith from Earth. You saved Finn's people, traveled to a different world to learn, met these guys there, came back here, found a magic tower, and now plan to found an organization with these friends and your current party. And now you want me to grant you permission to access to the teleportation port of Delta. That about sums it up. Seth nodded friendly. Everyone was sitting in a meeting room of the church and was supplied with drinks and sweets. Seth and co. had given the royal a rough rundown of their story to explain the situation. The princess thought for a moment before answering. No, she said with a sulky pout. Everyone looked crestfallen. In theory, there was nothing speaking against granting the permit. Why not? If I may ask. Seth asked. HNG, she looked around as if to find a serious explanation. She didn't and said with defiant tears in her eyes. I'm not giving Finn to you. She is my friend now. She won't leave me, right Finn? The fairy looked up in surprise hearing her name being mentioned. Finn will ditch the princess any time, for Seth. What? But I thought we bonded. Aren't we friends? Finn is sorry, ditched princess. That is that, and this is Seth. Ditched princess. Have you already forsaken me? You won't even say my name anymore. Big tears were flowing down her cheeks when she realized that she was much more invested in this friendship than the fairy. Finn the fairy brood could hit feelings just as hard as faces. Finn is sorry ditch. Lena, but if you make Finn choose, Finn will go with Seth. The last blow to the princess's fragile heart was seeing the fairy wink at Seth after choosing his side. She looked like an influencer who was betrayed by her chihuahua who was her only true friend. Don't be sad, she acted as if thinking hard for a moment. I know. Finn and Lena can stay friends if you give Seth the permit. The crying princess looked up at the little manipulator on the table in front of her. The fairy had her in her hands. Seth was almost frightened, but he already had an inkling that Finn was not as cute and innocent as she acted. Everyone, but especially Simon, was glad they had switched rooms to something more private. What had happened to the serious and competent princess he knew? Was this all a front, or was it the fairy's work that had turned her into such a childish woman? Really? Of course. Okay then. You can have the access, she said towards Seth. Her mood immediately lifted when Finn hugged her cheek and gave it a tiny smooch. Since Finn had the princess in her hand and the access was informally granted, Seth brought up the question of power supply. The Willis family. I got reports that they approached some officials concerning this matter. What do you have to do with that? It was time for Seth to see her professional side, which was as if a completely different personality took over once it came down to political themes. Talking to Lean also revealed that the Willis family was not quite honest before. It was not them holding control over the infrastructure needed to distribute power, it was the empire. Technically the Willis family would have sucked up the money of a partner when they were just a mere middleman. The whole conversation Seth had with them was for naught. He was just glad he had not signed any contracts yet. It made a lot more sense to talk directly to the princess. She was in the position to directly give him the connection to the responsible officials. Well, then this is all the time I can make for you. I still have other things to do. You should talk with Sir Smano from the Empire and Mr. Mayers from Delta. They are the people in charge of energy policies. I will inform them later. With that, she stood up to leave. He saw off Minor and the others who still had their duty to protect the princess. Now he was left alone with Simon. So, will you give me the permit now? The two went to reception hall, where foreign teleport channels could connect to. Simon handed him a badge with an intricate sigil on it. This is a magic item that will give you, or your teleportation formation, a special signature that allows you to connect to this place. If your magic tower is as advanced as you say, it can probably just scan it. It can. L confirmed the assumption. This meant Seth had taken care of his main objectives of the day in record time. And that meant the rest of the day was free time. He didn't get the chance to visit the auction house the other day. He was quite confused at first since the auction house was almost empty. That was until he realized what had screwed over the leadership and Mark Baker. As the only auction house on Earth, yet, there were only things from people in Delta. If he wanted to get the good stuff, he needed to access the interdimensional auction house, adding a not-so-small fee for the transportation. He would have to thoroughly think about what things to get from the auction house. Oh, that one. Get me that one. Puffles, you are awake. Yes, it is the great me, who else? I am unmistakable. Now get me that thing. The officer sent the confused Seth the picture of the item he had just scrolled past in the auction interface. It was a small box of black jade stones with bright golden inclusions. Seth's stomach sunk a little when he saw the price. The small box held about 500 G of star jade if he converted the measurements. The current price was 20 gold. Several times the price of star jade. Yes, that. And that one. The caterpillar communicated excitedly and sent another image into his mind. I see a pattern. Are you going to evolve again, Puff? Haha, yes. The great me is ready for the last evolution. Praise me more. Aren't you growing a little fast? Although I would like to take credit for my prodigy level of growth, I have to admit that it is the systems and your achievement. How so? The experience and levels helped master my skills, but it's you who keeps making me digest high-grade materials for my thread. So please take responsibility and get me a lot more. Seth could only sigh and look at the second thing his pet wanted. Puffles was like a pregnant woman choosing and pointing at random materials that currently fit his appetite. In the end, Seth had to spend 300 gold on, and more. The moment they were delivered, the pet space opened and sucked in the materials. Puffles did not even show his face before gobbling up his money. Asked what was the new material going to be. Astral bronze. Seth was really curious about the luminary theme. And his heart somewhat ached, spending so much on materials he could not use. His feelings were transmitted to Puffles, who felt a little bad. Not much, just a tiny bit. Here, you wanted this, right? This should be a fair exchange. The pet space slightly opened and spit out a bundle of. His slightly closed Seth's worries, since he had another thing to send Nadal now. He could send the bronze the old man expected and the fabric he bought as a surprise. After spending that much money, he did not feel like browsing anymore. He just wanted to leave. It was barely afternoon and the other would not get off duty until evening. Seth decided to return to Miner's March to implement the teleport connection. It would relax his relationship with Drosy when he could tell him that he would not have to encounter the people of the Willis family to enter Delta. He could bring his party to the city then. Seth really wanted his friends to get to know each other before they ultimately founded an organization. They could even decide on a name then. Hoping to sort out these things as fast as possible, he hurried back to the Willis building. The faster he got over this tedious stuff, the earlier he could get back to crafting and lazing around. Chapter 239. Willis or Willis and T. When Seth entered the lobby of the Willis building, he could not make out what he was even seeing at first. It was a gruesome scene with blood all over the lobby's floor. The blood was still fresh and had not dried, yet. He saw the corpses of the elderly couple and Fatty lying on the ground. They had died from deep cuts and stabs. Looking further, he saw a figure sitting at the secret door to the elevator. Lydia. Nailed to the wood paneling by her own daggers was Lydia. Her clothes were ripped, and her body was covered in cuts and burns. She was alive but unconscious, and her breathing was very shallow. Those burns are from curse magic, but those cuts. She was tortured. Tortured. Seth used but could not see much more than her health bar and some of the status effects thanks to the level difference. Her HP was slowly decreasing and suffered from several negative status effects like bleeding and anemia. After making her drink a health potion, her HP stopped dropping and some of the debuffs disappeared. He waited for her health to stabilize before removing the dagger from the wall paneling behind her. He moved her aside and the secret door opened. I see, you have returned. It's a shame you had to see this little, interfamilial difference, he heard someone say from the stair. It was Valen slowly walking down. His fangs were completely extended and he was drying his hands and claws with a slightly bloody white towel. I was just washing up after having a talk with my niece, he said with a sardonic smile. An infernal aura was emitting from the old vampire as his eyes glowed with the desire for blood. Get in the elevator, hurry. You can't fight him one-on-one. Seth lifted Lydia and equipped his full gear. Only 2 steps separated him from the elevator. He had just made his first step when a tremendous force hit his back and flung him and Lydia into the elevator. A scream echoed through the lobby, but not Seth's. Groaning Seth from the heavy strike and pushed the air out his lungs, he managed to close the elevator gates. As he looked up, he saw the vampire holding his hand with an expression distorted in pain. His claws were bleeding profusely with the nails broken and ripped out. As strong as the vampire was, his nails could not beat an epic.rated armor. The armor durability had fallen slightly and he had taken some blunt damage, but thanks to the reflected damage and overwhelming defense, Valen had hurt himself more than he had hurt Seth. The blacksmith almost felt confident to fight the vampire, if he didn't see the wound healing almost instantly. The bloodsucker had an even more freaky regeneration speed than a troll. After the claws had healed, Valen threw himself at the slowly descending elevator, but there was nothing he could do to get in or stop it. Only the Tower Master could enter and bring people with him. Frustrated, the monster roared and screamed as it hit and scratched on the barrier. At this point, the beast had lost all semblance with the elegant Valen and looked much more like a mutated monster bat or a really ugly gargoyle. And he had seen gargoyles. This was ugly even for their standards. Lydia and he slowly descended and Seth was happy when the thing left their view and was replaced by dark rock walls. Fuck, didn't expect that one. He had hoped to leave the Willis family in the dark for a little longer. Who would have thought they would find out so soon and react with such savagery? He had some time to think about what just happened and could roughly guess what had happened. But that they would actually fight and torture one of their family members. It simply confirmed that their decision to cut them off was right. He sat on the floor of the elevator and held Lydia in his arm, slowly feeding her another health potion. With the rising health bar, the cuts and bruises that covered her body slowly closed and improved. He just finished when the elevator finally stopped at his private quarters. Tower. Can you hear me? Affirmative, Master. Close off the elevator shaft. Nothing is allowed to pass through there unless I say otherwise. Anything that might manage to enter the shaft is to be teleported to a random place outside the tower. Seth supported the wounded cybergoth and walked out of the elevator. Port to the medical facilities. Affirmative. Boss. What happened? He was greeted by Jonah's surprised voice when he suddenly appeared in the med bay. The voices of Monique, Evie, and Drosy followed. Especially the old cat was surprised to see a Seth in full gear suddenly appear with a half-dead girl on his shoulder. They put Lydia down on one of the beds and left the medical treatment to Evie and Drosy, who had offered his help. As an experienced healer, he was a great help to the young witch. In the meantime, he assembled the others in the control room and explained the situation to them. The Willis people had obviously held some suspicions and ended up falling out with Lydia. Since it was highly likely that they tortured her for information, they probably knew about their plan to keep them out of the loop. Then how are we supposed to get to the surface? Monique asked, annoyed. Oh, don't worry about that one. Tower, scan this token and incorporate the sequence into the teleport function. Then you should be able to connect to Delta's access port. Affirmative. Now we can teleport into the city whenever we want to. He explained to them how the access roughly worked. Tilda, you should also make something like this token that gives off a signature. That way the tower will know when to transfer people from the port into the tower. You have the sigil of the tower master, but the other here don't. Tilda. Another point on his to-do list. Seth sighed. Since the Willis family fell out with us, did you get a connection for the energy trade? Allison asked finally. Seth looked at her in surprise. She was right, how did they even get suspicious in the first place? After telling them everything that happened, they came to the conclusion that the family probably had the official of Delta in their pocket. The possibility that they had something to bribe an official of the Empire was small. The princess must have informed them about their business, and that guy, in turn, told the Willis family. I will give contacting the Empire's main priority then. Let's talk about something more delightful. How about all of us go to the city in the evening and meet the rest of the gang? We can also decide on the name of our organization. Sound great? Link called out. He had been a little jealous of Seth being able to go out and party without them. Everyone else also nodded and smiled. It would have been a lie to say that the others did not feel similar. Everyone wanted some time to shut off and relax. They could not come and go as they wished until Seth managed to make a token to enter the tower, so they appreciated the chance to go and have some fun. But first, he returned to the med bay to find Drosy. The old cat was tending to the still unconscious Lydia. How is she? Out of danger, for now. But these burns might accompany her for the rest of her life, the elder said, and looked down at her with empathy. Seth finally got a look at Lydia with terrible cuts and covered in blood. He could not see the full scale of the burns, but the wounds covered half her neck and crawled up her jawline and her cheeks. Al had already mentioned something like that, but Drosy explained to him in detail. Under the system's influence, there were few wounds that could result in permanent damage. A cut-off arm. A high-ranked or high-leveled healer could regrow it. Terrible burns. They would slowly heal automatically as long as one survived. Cursed fire was one of the few ways to cause permanent damage. The malignant power of the curse would embed itself into the flesh and hamper the healing process. Even if it healed, without a thorough purification it would leave ugly scars. It was already cruel to use something like this at all. But using it on their own family member. It hit Drosy, who came from a culture of close familial bonds, a lot harder than Seth and the others. They both sat down and talked at her bedside. About what happened. And about their plans from now on. Seth also came clean about hoping for the Tyjarch to join him. I will have to talk with my people about this. I will contact you when we came to a decision. Chapter 240. The Best Journey. Seth decided to give Drosy all the time he needed and returned to the party. It was time to test their new teleport. There was still some time until evening, just enough time for pre-drinking. Not. Ruby would accompany them, so getting drunk would have to happen another day. All of them appeared in the reception room of the system church. There were guards similar to those at a city gate who asked them a few questions before letting them pass through. Mary, Jane, Tekka, and Ruby wanted to explore the city a little. Tekka would rejoin them later after the girls had their fun and returned to the tower. They left the church first and the other waited for some time before also leaving. The Willis family had no idea who belonged to Seth unless they saw him with those people. This way, even if they had someone keeping watch, they could avoid Tekka and his daughter being associated with this problem. The rest of the party, Allison, Link, Jonah, Monique, and Evie followed Seth to the shopping district. None of them had a casual outfit for the occasion. Since wearing full armor in the middle of town stood out like a sore thumb in Delta, they went to get some good clothes first. Some places accepted only system currency, other only credits. Few shops accepted both. Most of his party members had enough of both to pay for their own stuff. Seth had to lend Evie some money to get what she liked. At this point, Seth had accepted that he would take care of her instead of her brother. Once everyone was dressed accordingly, Seth led them to the bar he had visited the other day. Under the hands of Monique, even Allison had shed her nerdy witch looks and revealed a good-looking face and figure. As they were still choosing clothes for Evie, Seth had brought Link and Jonah to the section for men's clothing where Tekka joined them. The father had left the girls and Ruby with Simon at the church. Seth, Tekka, and Link had already followed the clerk's suggestions and each wore a stylish suit. The clothes here were all high quality and at least uncommon rated. They had no special effects, but the defensive properties were very good for cloth. Only Jonah stubbornly insisting on sitting to the side in his cloak with a high collar and wide hand. Seth understood that the tough guy felt embarrassed and uncomfortable to have his pretty boy face be seen by others, but this went too far. He couldn't bring Vampire Hunter C into a club to meet his people. He pulled the cloaked swordsman into a changing booth. Okay, Jonah, here is the deal. Man up, go with the sales lady and get a nice suit. In exchange I will make a mask to cover your face before leaving for the club, okay? He could see in the man's eyes that he was fighting with himself. It wasn't like he enjoyed wearing this stuffy outfit all the time. Although he disliked that his sweet manly muscles had been exchanged for a leaner body type, the bigger problem was the face. If Seth really made a mask for him, maybe he could finally wear comfortable clothes again. But it has to be cool and menacing. Yeah, just go with the nice lady and get something proper to wear. Seth didn't bother to leave the changing booth. He summoned the work table inside the cubicle and a bar of. It had been ages since he had last sculpted something with just his hands. He switched to his full gear and covered his hands in bright flame. Like this, he didn't need the forge. With his he could control the temperature and keep the metal malleable without liquefying it. Using also helped to form the material. As if using simple clay, the steel soon turned into a menacing demon mask with horns and huge tusks that gave it an overall disturbing look. It could be worn and fastened with a set of leather belts. He inserted a small monster core at the forehead and inscribed a circuit for it to change the size depending on the wearer. This was its only option, which meant it was a purely decorative piece. The power within the core was enough to adjust the size several times before running out. Making the mask had taken half an hour, enough time for everyone else to finally finish their purchase. When he came out everyone was done, except Jonah, who was desperately hiding in a changing cubicle. Please come out. Such a handsome face should not be hidden. It's such a shame for it not to be seen. Please, he heard the lady clerk swooning for him outside the cubicle. Now he understood Jonah's feelings a little better. Here, it's the mask I promised. Come out, let's leave. He reached past the curtain and gave Jonah his makeshift face protection. He could hear a shout of glee from inside, and a few seconds later a sexy demon left the cubicle. His stance was very confident and cool, with his collar unbuttoned halfway down the chest and his hand in his pockets. Jonah now looked like some mobster from a superhero show. Someone who owned nightclubs. Seth texted Minor that they would be waiting at the club that Lydia had shown him before the party left the shop. He got a different location as an answer. The town was already getting dark when they arrived at the meeting point. It was a big high-class restaurant with expensive decorations. It made one feel as if even breathing the air would cost money. He would totally make the diplomatic delegation pay for the food here. They stated their names and the receptionist got a server to bring them to a private room. Inside were Mike, Minor, Lixxis, Bulko, and Finn waiting on a bountiful table. Many mouth-watering dishes covered the table that made the onlooker fear its legs might buckle under the weight. This time it was not the fairy that glued herself on his cheek, but Minor that plunged in his arms and gave him a kiss. Seth was positively surprised and allowed her to direct him to a seat beside her. Everyone laughed a little at the blushing Seth and found a seat among the people present. They drank and talked. They ate and laughed together. Dad, who is the beautiful cat lady with brother? She asked innocently and pointed at Seth and Minor. Probably his girlfriend, right, he answered with a doting smile. The two in question suddenly had a heavy coughing fit. They had listened with half an ear and choked when they heard Tekka's answer. Looking at each other's reactions they could only start laughing together. Maybe they had really ended up in such a relationship without even noticing. It didn't feel weird, so all was good. They gorged on the extensive offerings of the restaurant, and only when everyone had filled their stomach to the brim and Ruby had fallen asleep, did they start talking about business. So, I think everyone is okay with founding an organization. A guild, came from Monique and Link. A guild. Mary and Jane whispered with bright eyes so not to wake up Ruby. A mercenary band, echoed Bulko and Mike. A night order. Finn called out. A workshop, Seth concluded. A home. Ruby mumbled as she cuddled Mary in her sleep. She had slightly woken up at Finn's suggestion. The night order already sounded far-fetched, but a workshop. Seeing their expressions when he mentioned to found a workshop, Seth made a 180 and changed his mind. I mean a guild, of course, he said, slightly disappointed. A guild could be everything they had mentioned and more. It could even be a home. What should we call it? All the founding members are here. Let's decide on a name. Seth concluded.